Good evening, and welcome to the June 27th, 2022 Winchester Select Board meeting. My name is Rich Mucci. I'm the chair of the Winchester Select Board. With me this evening is Vice Chair Anthea Brady, Mariana Gulubov, John Fallon, Michael Betancourt, and Acting Town Manager Beth Rudolph. We are going to start this meeting with some donations. We have a lot of donations, so this is fantastic.
I move that we accept a grant of $52,250 from the MEPC, which was used to hire a sustainability director.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I move that we accept with gratitude a donation of $1,330 from individuals and families with Winchester Recreation Department to be used for the Recreation Department Neighbors Helping Neighbors Fund.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I move that we accept with gratitude a donation of $700 from Lauren Preston to the Wildwood Cemetery for a memory tree to be deposited into the tree and bench account.
Second.
All those in favor?
Point of order.
Oh.
People can't hear in the back. Can't hear.
You can't hear what I'm saying, if we're supposed to hear, I'm sorry, we can't. That's the problem. No mic.
Are they? Sorry, we had a new sound system. There we go.
Thank you.
Did somebody second that? You want to? Why don't you read it again?
Yep. I move we accept with gratitude a donation of $700 from Lauren Preston to the Wildwood Cemetery for a memory tree to be deposited into the tree and bench account.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I move we accept with gratitude a donation of $1,000 from Virginia Steigels to the Wildwood Cemetery for the permanent care account.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move we accept with gratitude a donation of $500 from GLP Creative LLC for the downtown beautification project.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move we accept with gratitude 2 ARPA stabilization grants to the Recreation Department for April and May disbursements in the April amount of $16,333.33 to be used for the Rap Kid Connection, and the amounts of $5,633.33 to be used for the Lynch after-school program.
Second.
The May amount of $16,333.33 to be used for the Rap Kid Connection, and the amounts of $5,416.67 to be used for the Lynch after-school program.
Second. Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I move we accept donations of 2 hand brushes, 2 line brushes, and 3 nets from the Winchester Tennis Association for the Packer Ellis tennis courts.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I move we accept 2 early education and care workforce bonus grants totaling $8,482.50 to the Winchester Recreation Department for the 2 Recreation Department's EEC Child Care License Programs, Rap Kid Connection, and Lynch After School Program.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those are all unanimous. And again, thank you. Those are all accepted with gratitude from the board. We appreciate the community coming together and making all those significant donations to our town. Next up on the agenda, Town Manager's Report. So Beth, take it away.
Thank you. I have 4 appointments to make this evening. So in accordance with Section 4-2B of the Town Charter, and in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Department of Personnel Administration, Civil Service, and as permitted by Chapter 708 of the Acts of 1941 as amended, I have made the following conditional full-time appointments in the Police Department of Ryan Bond of Winchester for Patrol Officer and Edward O'Connell Jr. of Winchester for Patrol Officer. I respectfully request that the board vote to waive the normal 15-day appointment period for these 2 appointments.
Is there a motion for that?
I move that we waive the 15-day appointment period to appoint Police Department Patrol Officers Ryan Bond and Edward O'Connell Jr.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations to those 2 individuals.
And I have 2 more appointments to make. In accordance with Section 4-2B of the Town Charter, I have made the following regular full-time appointments in the Department of Public Works School Custodians of Andrea Longo Capicietti of Winchester, School Custodian, and Paul Marshall of Woburn, School Custodian. And I request that the board waive the 15-day appointment period.
Is there a motion?
I move that we waive the 15-day appointment period to appoint DPW school custodians Andrea Longo Capicietti and Paul Marshall.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, well, welcome aboard.
I just have a few other updates to share. So two very large retirements here in Winchester. One, Officer Peter Hersey of our police department is retiring after 40 years with the department, so we very much thank him for his service to the town. And also our library director, Ann Wharton, is retiring on July 15th. She's worked for the town for the past 13 years and has over 28 years of experience working for local libraries. So we want to wish her well and thank her for her service to the town. The Washington Street RFP is out on the street, and there will be a pre-bid meeting tomorrow on site at 10 a.m. The RFP responses are due August 1st. We're excited to announce that Senator Elizabeth Warren will be in town tomorrow for a meet and greet at 7 p.m. behind the Winchester Library. She'll be answering questions and giving updates and reviewing issues in Massachusetts. The event is free and open to the public, but there is a link on the town's website. They ask that you please RSVP. It is an outdoor event. I'm not sure. I think there won't be chairs or anything provided, so folks are encouraged to bring blankets or their own chairs to the event. Some of you may have heard that Massachusetts has Eastern Massachusetts has been declared a level 2 significant drought. So we are working with the MDBRA. The town of Winchester receives water from our own reservoir as well as the MDBRA system. Our reservoir systems are operating in normal capacity, and as is the MDBRA system, so we are not implementing any mandatory water conservation measures at this time, but we'll continue to monitor that over the summer, and certainly the rain we got today helps, so happy to see that. The MBTA station renovation is well underway, and there's a groundbreaking ceremony Thursday at 10 a.m., so everyone is invited to attend to that. And also, by the way of construction impacts, we'll have 2 weekends during the month of July 9th and 10th, and July 16th and 17th, where the MBTA will need to close down Waterfield Road Bridge, the area under Waterfield Road Bridge, to perform work on the overpass. So the road will be closed through traffic from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on those 4 days. In terms of our own construction projects, there's obviously a lot going around downtown. Eversource is working on Cross Street, Marion Street, or excuse me, Cross at Marion and Washington Street near the Aberjona River. The Vincent Owens Safe Routes to School project is wrapping up. They completed the pavement out there. It looks great. And they'll be finishing up their punch list items. The town is well underway of our North Reservoir Dam project. We're starting up our transfer station renovation. The Church Street at Waterfield Road project is well underway and hope to be wrapping up by the end of the month, or, well, now it's really the end of the month, so probably closer to mid-July. We're also installing the temporary pump station for the Arbor and Wendell Street neighborhoods. We'll be moving forward with construction at the intersection of Woodside Road and Wildwood Street. Still trying to nail down the schedule for that, but it'll be sometime in July or early August. And then a couple of community events I wanted to mention. The Planning Board and MAPC are holding a Holton Street, Cross Street Study Community Meeting tomorrow evening from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And Winchester Hospital is holding its annual community benefits meeting on Thursday, June 30th at 9:30 a.m. And there's more information about both of those events in the town's community calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Any questions for Beth on any of those subject matters? Beth, just on the Eversource construction, I know it's an ongoing situation over there. I do think, it may make sense to have, maybe bring the contractor back in before the board, either in July or August, just to discuss communications as we head towards the fall with the neighbors and just some issues concerning, these pop-up areas for detours and parking issues over there. I think there's some congestion on Swan Street today with just some of the contractors parking over there. So I think it makes sense to bring them back and, see if we can come up with a plan to better, facilitate this project for the neighborhood. We know it's a construction project. We know it's going to be a disruption for the area, but at the very least, hopefully we can just open up a line of communication as we head towards school reopening in the fall, because I think it's only going to get worse as we head into that direction. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but it's...
Yeah, it seems like it's been moving even more slowly than we anticipated, and maybe having a neighborhood meeting, something in Morocco or something like that would be helpful. I know we've done that in the past, and sometimes it's hard for people to come to our meetings So maybe that's something we would look to.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, I think.
Something
slow-
kind of on site even might be helpful, because someone that is, a high-level manager of the project might not realize that it's actually not moving at all, right? And it's loud, there's cars parked everywhere, it's pretty bad for what we would even come to expect with a normal project that, has difficulty, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a slow-going project, and I
Yep.
think now that it's reached Winchester, it's not gonna change, so I
Yep.
think, we just gotta figure out a way to kind of coexist with it and understand it's a burden, but, certainly, try to ease the pain for our residents over there in that area, so.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely more extended, time-wise than anticipated, and I think communication in that area is lacking. So anything that we can do to boost communication and sort of instill that we know what's going on and able to kind of keep communication moving so that people are aware. Not gonna be able to change the project, but be aware of what is happening from sort of week to week.
As an aside, I live up by VO, and certainly, that project is now wrapping up with the traffic light. They paved, they painted lines, so it looks
Yeah,
good,
looks
so
good.
some of these projects are getting checked off as
Yeah,
we go, and
cute.
same thing, Waterfield and Church Street seems to be going okay,
Yes.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll keep moving along, and through we go. But it's a busy construction season, we apologize. We said it was gonna be a burden, and, it's an investment in the town. We're lucky to have these agencies invest in our town, so we just gotta be patient, all of us. I think that's it for that. Any other questions or discussion on Beth's report? Oh, great. All right, what I think I'll do next is it's 10:08, so I think I will open up the first public hearing that we had scheduled for 7:45, which is the Eversource grant of location for 10 Pine Street. Is Eversource rep here? Hey, how are you?
Hello.
How are you?
How are you?
Jackie Duffy, Eversource.
Nice to see you, Jackie.
Nice to be seen. Known for you.
Right, exactly.
So Eversource has a grant location petition for 10 Pine Street. They proposed the installation of approximately 6 feet of conduit within the public right-of-way, which will require repair to the town-owned sidewalk in that area. DPW and engineering have reviewed it and have no concerns.
Any questions from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion, or, excuse me, is there anyone from the public here to speak on the 10 Pine Street Eversource grant of location? Seeing no one, is there a motion from the board?
I move that we approve the grant of location for the installation of approximately 6 feet of conduit in Pine Street.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Next up, we have Highland Avenue traffic calming public hearing. Our tool representatives?
Yep, we have Erica Guidaboni from Tool Design with us
Great.
tonight.
Come on up, Erica.
So just to give a little 2-minute or 30-second background while Erica's setting up. So the town worked with Tool Design in 2019 to complete a corridor study on Highland Ave between Mystic Valley Parkway and Forest Street. So we looked at that section of the road. And the goal of the study was really to understand kind of the existing vehicle safety, vehicle speeds and volumes in that stretch. And then we worked to propose some potential traffic calming improvements. So the first project that we moved through into the design phase was the installation of median islands at 11 locations along the corridor. That project was funded at fall 2020 town meeting. And so this is the outcome of that, that initial concept plan. Tool's taken it through the design phase, and we're here to kind of get feedback from the board and from residents on what's been proposed.
Great. So just for the public that's here tonight, the way this will work is we'll give Erica a chance to present her presentation. I'll open it up to the board to ask questions, and then I'll invite anyone from the public with any public comment on this issue to come up and be recognized and make their comment. Go right ahead, Erica. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Good evening. Nice to be in person. I haven't had an in-person meeting in a while, so this is a treat. Thanks for having me. My name is Erica Guidaboni. As mentioned, I am a professional engineer registered with the state of Massachusetts. and I'm here tonight to talk about the Highland Ave Traffic Calming Design Project. So we actually, the study area is between Mystic Valley Parkway and Forest Street. We actually performed this study in 2019, believe it or not, before the pandemic hit, so it feels like it's been a little while. What you'll notice on the graphic here is the speed limit signs are actually dated at this point. I've actually went out there since this study, and they're now 25 miles per hour, so that was an exciting change that happened. So I apologize for the difference here. I also want to acknowledge that we did also do a sidewalk assessment while we were out there, and we are aware of the gap in the sidewalk between Mystic Valley Parkway and Hillcrest Parkway. And while that is not going to be a recommendation this evening, that is a long-term plan to have a sidewalk filled in that piece of Highland Avenue. A little bit about Highland Avenue. So the stretch that we are looking at this evening is about 1.2 miles. It's approximately curb to curb, 27 to 31 feet wide, which is fairly wide for 2 lanes. You really can get away with about 22 feet for a road like this. So you've got a little extra pavement to work with on either side. Daily vehicular volumes, again, this is pre-pandemic, so the data might be a little bit different these days. Range between 9,000 vehicles per day and 12,500 vehicles per day, depending on the day of the week. Daily bicyclist volumes were around 58 bicyclists, so there are cyclists using the street as well. And as you'll note in the sort of small table there, and probably no surprise to many here, speeding is typically the highest in sort of the middle stretch of the corridor where you don't have the friction of either, the signal at the Mystic Valley Parkway end or the, kind of curve and on-street parking by the hospital that kind of narrows the road a little bit and creates a little bit slower speeds there. So at the time of the study, we were finding that the speeds were approximately, the 85th percentile speed, which is a fairly common measure of vehicular speeds, ranged to be about around 5 miles per hour over this posted speed limit at any given space on the road, while the average was around where the speed limit signs were posted at the time. Why is the study important? I think we all know speed increases severity. This is just a kind of a quick graphic that really helps to kind of set the tone for the purpose of studies like this. As a pedestrian, you are much more likely to survive or not have a strong injury or a severe injury from a crash if speeds are lower. That's also true for vehicular crashes as well. The likelihood of a severe injury or fatality decreases dramatically with speed. So the traffic calming toolbox, I'll try not to get too into the details here, but there are a few different categories of how you do traffic calming. Horizontal deflection, which is sort of shifting the road in one direction versus the other. Vertical deflection is the classic speed hump that everyone loves so much. Street width reduction, so that's just narrowing the whole road or having choke points basically, or the full thing. And then routing restriction, and that's really where you're kind of closing the road in the middle of it, or changing it to one way and making it, changing access dramatically to reduce speeds and volumes. So the things that feel appropriate for Highland Avenue, given that it has that around that 9,000 to 12,000 vehicles per day, it's an arterial, and it has access to the hospital. The horizontal deflection, where you're not going to be impacting emergency response vehicles with the vertical, or street width reduction are really what we determined to be appropriate for Highland Avenue. We looked at a few different options here that are listed on the left. We talked about bike lanes, we talked about curb extensions, chokers, which are narrowing points that come in from the extents of the road, median islands, which is what I'm going to get into now, and full roadway reconstruction. And the metrics that we use to try to measure the different options are related to traffic calming effectiveness, so how effective are they at reducing vehicular speeds, pedestrian safety and comfort, bicycle connectivity, and not impacting bicyclists, and weighing that with the impacts to parking, emergency response, and of course cost. So we landed on median islands as our preferred recommendation here, and there's a few reasons for that, including a full roadway reconstruction is fairly expensive and probably cost prohibitive at this time. We felt that these don't impact drainage, so they're not on the sides of the road, so that helps a lot with cost as well. They're less impactful for bicyclists, as they aren't on the edges of the road, kind of jutting into the road. And again, we didn't want to look at the, the speed humps and things of that nature, given the type of road that we're on. So our recommendation is to install median islands that create spot narrowing along the corridor. We're talking right now, the design has a 12-foot clearance from the edge of the median to the edge of the road. The curbing will be beveled. I'll show you a photo of what that looks like in a moment. They're about 400 feet apart, which, you don't really want to go any further than that, or the effectiveness of these really starts to drop. We did run auto turn, which is a program that allows you to kind of pretend you're a vehicle and drive in the driveways and drive in the side streets and make sure that these don't impact any access to any residential driveways or the side streets off of Highland Avenue. These are approximately 20 feet long by 3 feet wide, and so 20 feet long is like the length of a car. So it's a kind of an easy way to think about it. And they are appropriate for streets that provide access to hospitals and emergency services. So this is a really helpful example. I think precedent really helps a lot to visualize what it might look like. This is Canton Street in Westwood. I encourage everyone that is interested, you can kind of street view the whole thing and drive the whole corridor and see what it looks like. But this is really pretty much exactly how we laid these out. We used these as a precedent. And I actually did reach out to the company that designed these, Beta Group, and they said that they found a reduction of 3 to 7 miles per hour in speed on average throughout the corridor after this installation. The island locations, it's a little funny to show you where 11 islands will be on a mile-long corridor. So I put some dots on here. Hopefully that is helpful. Obviously, the plans are a lot more detailed than this. But we've got 11 locations along the corridor between Cliff Street and Kenwood Road. And we're looking at supplementing some of the existing crosswalks that are out there now, and actually the new one at Hillcrest Parkway as well. So Walcott and Hillcrest Parkway, we're going to have a median island right near it so that you kind of have that reduction in speed right around where those crossings are taking place. Stone Avenue is going to be pretty challenging given the proximity of some of the side streets next to Stone Ave. And with the rapid flashing beacon, we didn't feel as strongly about having a median island right near it. But in total, we've got 11 of them on the corridor as laid out in the image there. That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Questions from board members? Mariana?
In the spots in between the islands,
Mhm.
do you recommend that we paint the line closer to kind of keep the width of the lane the same as going around the island and also give space for, I'm concerned about bicyclist access, right? Because obviously, like next to the islands, it's gonna be narrower, so I
Yep.
would expect the bicyclists to use the full lane.
Yeah.
How do they, do we give cyclists a separated lane
Yeah.
once they're not around the island? How does that?
I think it might be ideal to just remove your edge lines actually, so that you don't have any sort of navigation happening there. That's actually a recommendation I've been making more and more lately. I think in the past, there was an understanding that edge lines actually made cars go slower because it visually narrowed the road, but what it actually does is remind you exactly where the edge is and makes you feel like you own the space between the center line and the edge line. So I think removing the edge line would be the best case scenario there. And you still do have 12 feet next to the median island, so it's not super narrow.
Okay.
Other questions?
I know when we discussed the Hillcrest crosswalk, there was discussion that there's not enough crossings between Mount Vernon and going, is that north? So does putting in these medians sort of provide opportunities for us to add crosswalks as we're doing that?
Certainly, I mean, the opportunity could be that hopefully the road is going to be slower, so they'll be safer to have crossings. And you certainly could utilize where they are if there's kind of a desire for more crossings. I know the Hillcrest one was really essential because currently the sidewalk ends there, so that was a priority. But you could certainly, I think if the desire is there, you'll have a safer street to be crossing. Eric,
I had a question about the data. So it looks like the data was taken about speed limits back when the speed limit was 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So it was 5 miles over. Is there any data since the speed limit's been dropped to 25?
No, there's not.
Okay. And I guess just for some of our veteran board members, because I was not here in 2019, what prompted this process to begin with?
Yeah, so there was money that we received at town meeting, and we actually, working with the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Committee, we prioritized the Highland Ave corridor and the Cross Street corridor as areas where there was heavy traffic and high volumes and high speeds. And so those were the two that we really zoned in on, trying to find some measurable ways to both, not necessarily to reduce the volumes, because that's a very hard thing to do, but to reduce the speeds, to make it safer for everybody who's using that corridor. So those were the two that were funded. We've kind of held off on doing anything on Cross Street just because of the Eversource work. And we did in 2020 get the funding, the design funding for this project, and we were hoping to move quickly in construction, but then we had another project come in over bid that we kind of had to move the money around. So this has taken a little bit longer to get to this point than we hoped, but we're here, and hopefully we'll move into the next phase with capital planning for construction money.
Yeah, as Beth said, this is one of the highest priority projects that came out of really our creation of TTAC, and so it rose to the top right away. And I think that we saw that there was people starting to use Waze, and just the traffic volumes there were increasing, speeds were increasing, and there a lot of people were cutting through, and so we felt that we needed to do something, and this got delayed, but it was one of the highest risk areas that we noticed right away, that we identified and started evaluating, and that's why it was prioritized at that time. So I'm glad to see that we're addressing it, and this seems like a great solution so far. So thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead,
What's
Ryan.
the cost?
So I think the number you gave me back in February was like $190,000.
That's right. 193, and that was in February, and
Yeah, so it's
Numbers
probably
are
like 3
changing a
times
lot,
that
yeah.
much now. That didn't include construction admin, which is probably,
it actually did, but I
Oh,
don't
did
know.
it? Okay.
It depends what amount of construction admin
Okay.
we want to do, but yeah, so it's probably a little bit more than that, and numbers aren't going down.
Right.
It's actually lower than I thought you were
Yeah.
gonna say for
Yeah.
11 Islands, so, yeah.
I mean, I'm putting in the capital request. Should this move forward, I'll put the capital request now, and I'm gonna have to inflate it, because this is a spring or summer of '23 project, and I just have no idea where we'll be.
Honestly, at every estimate that I've given the engineering department, I generally say like we just are starting to just recommend faking the numbers at this point, because they've been so erratic, and we generally don't provide, when we're gonna go to bid, I'll do another round of it with what the latest numbers are, because they expire pretty quickly.
Erica, just one concern I have, and it goes back to my days as an assistant district attorney and prosecuting thousands of OUIs. Are these strategically placed, so that if someone does hit them because they're distracted or under the influence of something, they're not a launching point into somebody's, house or something like that, losing control?
Yeah, they physically shouldn't be a launch, and they're really not super tall, super beveled. It's a pretty mellow thing. I mean, you'll damage the signs, and that'll probably slow you down
Right.
a little bit. But
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that there's a design element to that,
Yeah,
should-
so I did give you the feedback on what Beta Group said about the Westwood experience. But I did ask about other things. The interesting thing was really the speeds had dropped, but she said there were no noted issues in crashes or plowing or anything like that, so.
Yeah, no, I drive Canton Street a lot,
Good
so,
news.
I mean, I'm used
Oh.
to seeing them, so,
You know it, okay.
yeah.
And we did work with the DPW in terms of where we laid them out, and then also looking at the type of curbing to make sure that when plows are going through, if they do hit them, it's the beveled edge will help to mitigate that.
So if there's nothing else from the board, at this point, I'd open it up to the public for comment. What I'd ask you to do is, when I call on you, come on up, sit down, identify yourself with your name and address, and we'll give you up to 3 minutes to talk. So, sir, why don't you come on up?
Thank you very much. Steve Blackshaffer, 195 Highland Avenue. You'll not be surprised to hear. And I want to express my gratitude for this whole topic. And I really appreciate the expertise that's being brought to bear on this. The one question I had, which I didn't think was addressed, was something that was raised by Mr. Betancourt, which is the Waze phenomenon. Because there are 3 traffic lights between Forest Street and Mount Vernon if you go along Washington Ave versus none along Highland Avenue. And I realize that this is a very convenient route to take if you're in a hurry, but if our goal is to somewhat decrease its use, I realize you can't redirect the traffic very strongly, but we have amazing internet means of directing us these days, and I wonder if there might be some way of making the differential in transit time somewhat different, such that fewer people were incentivized, encouraged to take Highland Avenue. And I'd like to end by thanking you again for doing this at all.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Does
I don't know,
any-
Erica, do you have any? I mean, I think part of it is, obviously, the slower traffic goes, the less that Waze will direct you. Although I know I've heard stories of Waze directing people down one street, down like Washington Street, up another street, down. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy. But I do think this, you know, the slower traffic will help to mitigate Waze sending people in that direction. And then also, you know, us making it safer, even though there are maybe just as many vehicles, at least the traffic will be slower for pedestrians and other users. That's really our goal. And I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I had the same thought but I actually have no idea how Waze makes those choices,
Yeah.
so I really don't want to step into that too much, but I agree that if I think it takes actual vehicular movement, so if it is kind of processing that there's a lower speed happening on Highland Ave, I think that it would push you over to a different street.
Interesting.
But if 93 is going just as slow, then
Mhm.
that's the problem, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a quick fix for that. Anyone else with public comment on this topic? Sir?
Jack Shea, I live at 163 Highland Avenue, rental location, because it's very close to Park Ave. And as far as I experience it, that is a real hot spot along Highland. Cars honk, I don't know how many accidents I witnessed. That one intersection, I wonder if there's any plan to do anything specific for that Park Ave and
So-
Highland.
Nothing specifically different, but we did place one pretty close to there I did, that is backed by data that is a hotspot for crashes, yeah.
I'm on Governor, so I get to hear
Yep,
the crashes
yep.
and I've been out there when
Yeah.
they occurred. And
Yep.
one car went across the street from Park Ave and hit the wall.
Oh.
So that's
So
impressive.
we have one placed in front of 172 Highland Ave. So
I'm in
it's
front
on
of
the,
166 across the street. I'm at 163.
okay, so this is on the hospital side of the Park
No,
Ave
it's
intersection?
past Governor's heading out towards South
No,
Florida.
I'm saying that we have a median island that we've
Yeah.
proposed in
No,
front
I
of
like that house.
172.
It's that people seem very aggressively, they don't let other people come in.
Yeah.
But I think you're in certainly the right direction. It's good.
Yeah, I think the hill too is which isn't really a solvable issue, but people get a little aggressive getting out because of the
Rather than
hill.
put a
Yeah.
light there.
I do think, again, if vehicles are moving slower on Highland Ave, they'll have to be less aggressive getting
Let's
out.
hope so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Susan? Welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. See you all in person. And I live on Kenwood Road, on 28 Kenwood Road, one of those streets that runs between Washington and Highland. And so I'm very encouraged that there will be traffic coming along Highland and in that area. That's great. As I understand it, you're not going to be widening the pavement of Highland.
No.
And so what I'm wondering about is bicycles. I think currently they do use the sidewalk. Kids will use ride their bikes to school to McCall, and I'm just concerned about, now we're going to have to be sure that all the McCall kids and people who ride bikes along there know about telling people when you're riding on the sidewalk, I'm on your right, and I'm worried about, the interaction of bicycles and pedestrians and cars along Highland, now that Highland will be, you know, the travel lanes will be narrower, and the bikes will be nearer to the cars, unless they're on the sidewalk when they're interacting with pedestrians. I'm also a little concerned about, I would really encourage you to put flashing beacons wherever there's a crosswalk. It's a straight shot along Highland, even with islands like this, with the medians, and even with, if you have a crosswalk without a flashing beacon, when traffic is heavy, or when people are going really fast, when it's like, you know, not during the commuting, the rush hour. It's very strange with the pandemic. I think there's less traffic, less congestion, and people are going faster. They have the road to themselves. So I'm concerned that, you know, in order for more than one person to be crossing the street, and in order for the traffic island to really be a refuge, if you have a family, you know, walking across the street, they're not going to really fit on that island. So I'm thinking where there are crosswalks at Hillcrest, I think it's very important to have a crosswalk there, and up by Stone
Walcott.
Ave.
Yeah, Stone Ave has a rapid
It
flashing beacon.
does, but it doesn't sound like it's going to have an island where
No, it
people
just couldn't,
are
we just couldn't
safe.
fit it in
Yeah,
with the intersection where it's right at
Because
the
Wilson's right
intersection.
across, and there's a
Yeah.
couple driveways, and so it was just, we couldn't fit one.
yeah. Yeah, just to really pay attention to that, because I walk there frequently, and there are families crossing, and there are people, you know, with bikes, and 3 feet is not the size of an adult bike either, so.
Yeah, no, they are not, you know, qualified to be refuge islands. They're not, you know,
Right.
wide enough for that. I think you need 6 feet minimum on that.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're not,
Yeah, so-
that's why they're not gonna be really right on top of them for that reason.
And the only other thing is, these drawings are really helpful, but if you could have them up on the website,
Sure.
so the neighborhood understands what's going on, that'd be really good.
Are the crosswalks going to have flashing beacons, all of them, or no?
No, we're just maintaining the one at Stone Avenue. There's no recommendation for that.
Yeah, I try to use the one on Hillcrest to
Mhm.
cross, just to get
Mhm.
people used to it. But, you know, people slow down, people do stop, but, you know, sometimes I'm just very worried that people aren't going to stop.
Do you feel that the,
And-
sorry?
And I was going to say, and that's where you have to cross if you're coming from
Yes.
Hillcrest, because if you're crossing towards Washington Street down the hill, because there's no sidewalk.
Have you found the in-lane center sign at Walcott makes any difference? Because Hillcrest doesn't have anything like that yet.
No, because
No.
people, that's knocked down half the time, to be honest with you. Yeah, I just feel very strongly there should be flashing beacons for the crosswalks.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this is kind of the first step.
Yep.
We can hopefully help to add those additional safety measures as, you know, as time goes on.
And I know that those beacons are expensive, too,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Yep.
Thanks, Susan. Anyone else?
Thank you. Ben Keeler, I'm Chair of the Traffic and Transportation Committee. Nice to see you again. I am a resident. I am speaking as the Chair of the Traffic and Transportation Committee tonight, just to make that very clear. And I do want to just advocate for the work. Certainly, you know, when we took this project on in 2017, 2018, Beth, Jay, and other residents, you know, took a walk and, you know, saw the conditions. We have had improvements there, both the speed signs, which were very helpful. I do have a follow-up question later, but fog lines. So actually painting those white lines on the side we saw reduction of speed because of that, and we actually used that as a template to roll out those to other high-speed corridors in town. So I'd be interested to come back on that, but I think just the larger topic here is just using this as an example for where we can make improvements like this elsewhere in town. So, you know, we saw that the activity with the fog lines as being beneficial elsewhere in town, and we're able to roll that out. Obviously, cost being a primary concern, but, you know, our town is full of roads like that. It does have some unique conditions, but having a sidewalk on one side is a unique condition. Johnson Road, as an example, Ridge, you know, needs those same things. Lockland. So there's a lot of parallels here, and so I would encourage the board to look at this, you know, not just as a one-time thing, but something, you know, that we could find other applications for. Certainly, we want to be doing it in line with DPW, so it's maintainable. There's different versions. I'm sure when we get down to final design, we'll want to make sure that DPW feels comfortable, you know, being able to maintain it, but, you know, certainly advocate for it. We do have some of the same concerns as it relates to bikes and, you know, getting bikes actually pushed into traffic, and would love to, you know, work with Tool and the select board on other options that might help that. There could be things like soft curbs or something like that as part of the construction, which might give, and again, we haven't gone through all the engineering, but potentially is something to look into. And yeah, again, I think just interested in your take on the fog lines, and repeat that. You wanted to get rid of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like some of the stuff in traffic engineering is a little bit of an art and not quite a science, and it's sort of a thing that's in debate throughout the industry. And what there's finding right now, and I don't know that I'd be able to pull a study so much as conversational and anecdotally, they're finding that when a driver believes that when you kind of define their space, it's their space. So visibly, you know, when you have a line on both sides, your expectation is that that's yours. And so when you start to break that up a little bit, you know, I really like removing center lines when you can, and fog lines is another one there. When you start to soften up the space, it becomes a little bit more shareable.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we've seen more bicycle volume on Highland.
Yeah.
People feeling more comfortable, especially going north, once we put in the fog lines. So
Okay.
it's been a benefit to the town. Again, there are safety issues associated with that, but we've definitely seen a pickup. And obviously, we want everyone to enjoy that road. You know, so whatever we can do to promote that. Obviously, the Fells as well. It's one of our primary tenants is access to green and blue spaces. The Fells is that space for us. So the more crosswalks, the more safety, the more access we can offer to those things, I think the town would really benefit.
I'll just acknowledge that, you know, it's hard to imagine everyone going 25 miles per hour on Highland Ave potentially right now, but you weren't that far off, and if we can get that, you know, 3 to 7 miles per hour deduction there, that is a safe speed for bikes to be sharing the road. And you don't have enough width today to formalize bike lanes, so that was one of the reasons that option was scrapped.
Yeah, the last thing I'll just advocate for is if we do end up keeping fog lines, especially near the hospital, we need to redo those to help accommodate parking on the east side of Highland across from the hospital. And we fail to do that over and over and over. Just because we don't have a plan and a plan that we execute against, there are actually cars that are sort of parked over the fog line on that side. And really what it just takes is us saying, the road's here, you park here. I think that also, you know, fits in other places within the town. So again, you know, I'll argue fog lines, you know, for days. We won't do it tonight, but there are really benefits to doing that. And you know, the DPW repainted a lot of the downtown here recently. It's been great.
Where you have the on-street parking, I
Yeah,
completely agree. So
fantastic.
we at least can
Great.
find common ground there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Jay, did you want to add something, Jay? Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, we are doing the hospital this summer. We were just talking about, we're gonna move the center line over so that it can take care of the parking across the street from the hospital.
Great. Thanks, Jay. In the back?
My name is Linda Kimball. We live at 97 Highland Avenue, and I'm just interested in what consideration you made for mail trucks stopping, since our delivery of mail on Highland Avenue is by truck. And on our particular corner, there are only 3 houses facing Highland before the next street is. So even if he walks those 3 houses, he's got to move his truck continuously down Highland, and I wonder how the islands impact that.
It's a great question. So he would not be able to park right next to the island, or he would be blocking that lane. So it would be, you know, on one side of it or the other. So it takes up about 1 car length, so the truck would take up that space. So it can't be right next to the island. Does he stop along Highland Avenue and not on side streets and?
Oh, absolutely.
along the road,
He
yeah.
does Highland
Yeah.
Avenue.
So it could be an educational thing, really, honestly, to convey to the mail carrier. But yeah, it will be a change.
97,
97.
next to Lebanon.
Looks like so the closest one would be in front of 101 and 102 Highland Ave.
But the point is, he's going to be moving his truck all the way down.
Right, so there'll be.
Oh, really slow down speeds on Highland Ave. You got a Dodge mail truck and
But my
Islands.
question is really, there's not room for him to park and a car to go around.
Yep.
Not right next to the island, no.
And the islands are only 20 feet long, so
Okay,
they would just have to avoid parking in that.
thank you.
I get your point. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely something we would need to,
And it could be a
educate the
safety-
Yeah,
post
we
office
should.
on and,
Definitely.
It could be a safety issue if you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
the traffic's moving and suddenly.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm more
Thank you.
concerned about an Amazon truck or something like that too. Because those seem to be more prevalent.
Those trucks are even bigger.
Right. Sir?
I'm Mike McKenna, 88 Highland Ave since 1978, I'm happy to say. I support the idea of putting blinking lights at the crosswalks. I'm very happy you put one at Hillcrest. I think it was a very, very good idea. I would also like to ask that somebody replace the stop sign that was at the intersection of Fells and Highland. That was knocked down by a snowplow a long time ago and never replaced. And that intersection was a very dangerous intersection, more because people coming up the hill without a stop sign would just blindly go up and try to cross Highland Ave and get smacked by a car that's going 30, 35 miles an hour. Coming out of Fells is not that bad, but still, I think there should be a stop sign in both places. And I share the concern about where Park Ave and Highland, it's very difficult to get on the road. And if you're lucky enough to get an opportunity to get on Highland Ave, you would like to have a car with a lot of torque, a lot of horsepower to get on the road, and then slow down. But I don't know anything about your industry, but from my perspective, and you know, I see the traffic a lot, and I hear the traffic a lot. The concerns I have more are people who don't care about speed limit signs and drive 50 miles an hour down the road. Now, I don't know what you can do other than have policemen there and catching these bozos, but I dig out the fire hydrant in front of my house every time it snows. And when there's a lot of snow, I'm very cautious about standing up if I'm digging, because I think I'm gonna get hit by a car. So, I mean, to be honest with you, making a 25 mile an hour speed, I don't even know when you put those signs up, but there's a sign right in front of my house. I mean, I noticed them last week. I don't know when they went up, but I noticed them last week. But the point is that if somebody's gonna look at a 30 mile an hour zone or a 35 mile an hour zone and drive 50 down the road, and I'm not exaggerating, they drive very fast, because they treat it like it's the Mass Pike between Medford and Stone. I don't know, that's maybe a question I asked the police department, but I think somehow or other it's gotta get the word out that people are gonna drive like maniacs down the road are gonna get popped. And gonna get tickets and cost them the privilege to drive a car. Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, narrowing and so forth like that, but I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do it other than get police.
You certainly
involved.
can't design for people that are completely ignoring the rules of the road, so.
And I would also say that I was driving down here, and I've been living on that road for a long time. And I looked at my speedometer, I said, I'm speeding, because I'm not going 25 miles an hour. And just because I'm used to it, I'm going to drive it all every day. So it's going to take adjustment for me, like anybody else. And I'm hoping you're right, that if people actually look at the speed limit signs, they're going to be a little bit more conscious about driving a lot faster. Because I think there's sort of a unwritten law and some hallucination in people's minds that if the speed limit is something, you can drive 10 miles an hour faster. And so maybe that will help. So I'm hoping it'll work. I'm a little concerned about snowplow with these islands. I don't know how you can, I mean, if you've got an island and you've got a sign in it, the guy's got to go around it. So who's going to clean up around the island? I don't know. But that's
Okay, who's going to clean up around the island?
I'm not worried about it. The 12-foot lanes, snow plows are 10 feet, so we have no problem about plowing.
Yeah, but I would think there'd be a big pile of snow in the middle of the road.
Not in the middle of the road, it won't.
Where the island is.
Yeah, but we'll take care of that.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Like I said, I don't know. I've just lived there for a long time and watched what's going on.
Appreciate it.
I mean, it's tough to get out of my driveway.
And
I have to back out of my driveway, and that's a trick on Highland Ave.
Sure it is.
And I understand your point about, still wanting to drive 35 miles per hour because the road is still, looks the same way as it did when it was signed that way, so.
I'm not saying, I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah, but it feels like it's, it feels like you're supposed to be able to go, 30, 35 on the road, the way that it's designed today, so.
This old dog can learn a
New
new
tricks.
trick, I guarantee you. But anyway, so, I don't know if you have any idea where I am, but if people are coming from the Medford direction, going towards the Stoneham direction, there's a little rise in the road right before you get to Fells. So if somebody's going really fast and I'm trying to back out of my driveway, boom. And especially when there's snow drifts. I not only cut down the snow drifts at the end of my driveway, my neighbor's driveway, and the corner of Fells and Highland, because I can't see cars coming when there's snow there and they're driving too fast. So I hope we can get people to drive slower. So I appreciate the effort. I'm really glad you're doing this, because I've been concerned about it for a long time. Just didn't know what to say. And I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to at least say something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Randy Blackshaffer, 195 Highland. I wanted to advocate for the constituency that hasn't been talked about a whole lot here, which is the people who walk along the sidewalk on Highland Avenue along the west side. I don't know if you have any data on how many walkers there are, but I see them every day, and there's a lot of people. There's lots of kids walking back and forth to school at all grade levels. There are families going back and forth. There are people walking up to the Fells. The place where I have personally found that to be an issue is once again the Park Avenue and Highland intersection, where I personally came very close to getting totally clipped by a car one day because the car was coming up Park Avenue and was looking at cars in Highland both ways and didn't notice me as the walker coming across. I would like to put in my own 2 cents suggesting that something needs to be done at that intersection, maybe a traffic light or some kind of walking signal for people who are walking back and forth. Do you guys have any data about how many people walk along the sidewalk there?
We didn't get pedestrian data, no.
I think it's a significant route for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those concerns, something to consider down the road. As Beth said, this is, a beginning, and we'll see how it goes, and then it's a work in progress, and we can certainly address some of these other concerns, all good concerns that have been raised tonight. Anyone else? Oh. Roger?
Recommend 14 Stevens. I'm a little bit concerned that we're operating with not bad, but old data, and a little bit of concern about turning all the dials at once. We have just changed the speed limit, and we don't really know the effect of that yet. But what I'd most like to echo is the point that was made. If you go up and down Highland, you see that the curbing that exists there, it's hit and miss, but there is some hard curbing there. So when somebody goes along, and if you go down that street during the summertime, you'll see big landscaping trucks that are pulled off to the side, and it may be an education issue, but they're not going to park in front of the driveway where the person whose yard they're working on is at. They're going to push forward, and they're going to undoubtedly park by one of these islands. Same thing with delivery trucks, and we've got emergency vehicles that are going down there. I'm not really sure what's going to happen when one of those things happens. We've got somebody parked along the side, you've got an island, are we expecting them to baja over it, and go around it somehow? It's all about response time, right? They're trying to get to the hospital or an emergency or something else. So it's not clear to me what we're going to be doing in those circumstances. Are we going to make it no parking on Highland?
You definitely can't have parking right next to the island, so you'll be losing, 11 spaces in each direction essentially, plus a little bit more give and take on either side. When I've been out there, I haven't seen very much utilization of the parking, which I think actually is part of why you have a speeding problem, is that there's not that friction happening on either side of the street. So there certainly are, I've seen a lot of the landscaping trucks and delivery trucks, and, the post office is obviously a big piece of that as well.
Wintertime, you've got heating oil trucks, so it's year-round. I think we've got to give it a lot more consideration about what's going to happen in those areas.
Good point. Thanks, Roger.
Can we paint not stopping on each side of the island? Is that
Yeah.
something that's-
Absolutely.
Sir?
Sorry, Bill Kimball, 97 Highland Ave. So I have a number of design questions that might fit into this. So you mentioned the speed limits, and I was wondering whether you measured them in one place or in multiple places along the distance between Town Hall all the way up to Forest Street.
3 locations.
Could you explain?
I've got it in a table to remind myself. South of Fairmont Street, south of Stone Avenue, and south of Webster Street are the 3 locations that we got data for a total of 3 days.
Okay. What I'm trying to get a sense of is
Sure.
there's clearly 2 hills.
Mhm.
And going up a hill, you're going to be going a little slower because people don't push the accelerator pedal down.
Mhm.
When they get to the top at Highland, the accelerator pedal is still pushed. They don't have the resistance of climbing a hill. They're going to be going faster. So the important areas are going to be probably from the hospital all the way down to the traffic lights, which is going to be the point where you're probably going to have the most speeders. Then you're going to have them going downhill, that is if you're going south, to Town Hall. So there's a potential of accelerating if they don't back off, although there's a light if they hit it.
Yep.
So the question is, maybe different areas require somewhat different thoughts and maybe density of islands.
I understand your point. I think in general, we're trying to have kind of a cohesive design for all of Highland Ave. We're actually not doing them up by the hospital because of the curvature of the
Sure.
road
No,
and
I
the parking.
understand.
Yeah.
I understand, but I'm just saying that depending on what the native speed of the automobiles are, you may need to treat sections differently, the way you're going. And so it get to be maybe a multimodal approach. So when I see these blinking lights, I'm more apt to be aware of the speed and potentially slow down. There's none of those included in this, and my sense is multimodal approaches tend to be a little stronger than one size fits all approach. And could we maybe space some of the islands out a little bit and put in a couple of speed monitors? Once you've slowed it, the only people are going to speed up only if their intent is, I don't give a hoot about the speed, I'm going to go. Once you've slowed them, there's a tendency to stay slower rather than re-accelerate. So do you need as many to get there to keep the effect that you're having, and what is the data? I will just say that the picture that you're showing is a very rural area, there's nothing around. My sense would be to drive faster because there's nothing there. I'm in a congested area with a lot of other things, and so there are a lot of impediments to just going fast. 7 or 8 o'clock, you can't move at all. And I've been out on the weekends on that area between the street and the sidewalk, and they do move. It scares me. So I certainly agree the need with this. It's important, but just trying to wonder how we accomplish that. And as you've mentioned, we can't stop the people that are going to break the law, period. But we're trying to encourage those that are malleable to do the right thing. And if we could save money, say, by putting in blinking lights, it might save money versus more islands. I don't know, that's an analysis that could be done. The other question is the different speed differentials between time of day. So going south, is it faster in the morning than in the afternoon, and vice versa when most of the cars are going? And how would that impact the design or the spacing?
So I'll just tell you that I do have all that data. There's a
Okay,
really
yeah,
pretty
okay,
graph in my memo that I wrote 3 years ago. So I'm sorry, I can't recall exactly the time of day. I will tell you that in general, when the congestion is higher, the speeds go down, and then those off hours is when it really gets pretty fast. You actually can see the northbound versus southbound up on the screen, and generally the southbound direction is a higher speed than the northbound direction, which anecdotally, I think that you said that you were probably expecting that. Is that correct? I think you had said that.
It would be logical. It doesn't mean that it's true. We're
Right,
talking
yeah,
about human behavior, but
exactly.
physics
Yep.
kind of would encourage that.
So, and then speaking to the spacing, we're actually at about 400 feet between these, which is actually longer than what is recommended, given all the presence of driveways, side streets. We wanted to be really mindful of impacts here, but they're actually further apart than what they generally recommend, is more like 250, 300 feet. So we're already kind of pushing that limit, so I really wouldn't want to kind of skinny this up any more than we already have.
Would you skinny it up towards, I mean, we've heard a lot about Park Ave, that intersection. Would you skinny it up going towards Park Ave on either side, or no?
I will definitely look at it again, and I will, we can look at like sight lines there to make sure that they're appropriate. I'm hopeful that with the speeds going down, that intersection will naturally become safer, but I understand the concern, of course. I don't know that we could get more there. I'll have to look more closely. We were very careful about driveway aprons and side streets, and it's pretty challenging to fit these in.
Yep. I get it. Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you,
just
sir.
wanted to mention the flashing beacons are more expensive than an island would be, so overall, this is not certainly something we could add in the future. Doesn't prohibit that.
Anyone else? All right, seeing no one, I will close the public portion of the hearing. And Beth, what is the action item you want the board, recommend the board take?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could do it two ways. You could either take a formal vote, or we could just kind of get a sense of the board. If this overall design, obviously taking into account the feedback we've heard this evening, for any minor changes is kind of the direction we want to head. I would be putting in a capital request this cycle for funding, either a fall or springtime meeting for spring or summer of '23 construction. So as long as we're kind of headed in the right direction and the board is, comfortable with that moving forward, I think that's kind of what we'd be looking for at this point.
Thoughts on that, anyone?
I think it's great. I think it's needed. I live by there. I walk by there. So I'm an advocate. It's a good place to learn for the rest of the town. We should start on it.
Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the public was on board with this idea. I think there's some things, we got some good feedback on things to work out and to consider. So definitely helpful to have the public's input on this, but I think certainly it's something, that we should probably move forward with, so.
I mean, I think the concern of, somebody parking even temporarily along the side, I think that can be addressed with no standing signs, right, or paint on the street, that is separate from the construction. So I think, as designed, I'm good with moving forward with it.
We good?
I'll just add my 2 cents. I think we definitely have to move forward with it, and I think one thing we always hear is enforcement. So lowering the speed limits, doing this stuff is only as strong as our enforcement. It's hard for us to cover a lot of territory in Winchester with our existing force, but maybe analyzing that as well will be helpful. We heard a lot on the Park and Highland intersection as well. That's a kind of a particular area that maybe we can draw some more conclusions around if we evaluate it. And the question of where the trucks go is a good one, because if you're normally a landscape truck or a delivery truck and you park on Highland and you're running in and out, and then you park on a side street on a corner to be close to that same house, you're at an incline coming up a hill, and that truck is really blocking your sight line from both sides, right? So that's somewhere where we probably can look to. I mean, we don't want to carve out and put, no standing signs everywhere, but I know that we have kind of put paint on kind of around corners of no parking, so to push people back. And I know that we did that here on the corner of Church and Waterfield as well. And but again, that if there's no enforcement, then it just turns into a space for a delivery truck, right? So that is only the neighbors are the ones that are respecting it, and so that's the problem. But I'm glad that we're at least making this recommendation to capital. I think it's an important one.
Being familiar with many of those streets leading between Washington and Highland, I think there's some strategic parking near the corners also to kind of curb the traffic, zooming up and down. to get between, especially in the mornings when you're faced with a lot of congestion on both directions, both streets. But I think, hearing Park and Highland, being familiar with that being a challenging intersection, and hearing, some requests for also some future considerations around beacons and street safety, I think, are good things to consider moving forward.
So I think that's the consensus of the board at this point, so
Yeah.
to proceed as
We'll move
as
forward.
planned.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone for attending.
Yep, thank you, everyone. All right, so that's the end of that. Thank you, Erica, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Erica.
Good to see you all.
Nice to see you.
Here's your thing on Southern Indiana, State Highway.
Yeah.
As you're driving along,
Just gonna be chased out of the building talking about it.
Catch the end of the sunset now. You turn
I
around.
know, I've been watching it. So I'll give the second for the room to clear out, and then I'm gonna go back up to regular public comment. Just to remind people, you can, per the select board policy, we invite you to come up, give up to 3 minutes of public comment. Please start by introducing yourself with your name and address, and that matters for public comment should be focused on what's on the select board agenda for the evening. So with that, I would invite any members of the public to come on up. Diab?
Good evening. I actually have 2 matters I'd like to speak with you about.
Okay.
And I don't know, I'd like to speak about the ADU bylaw that's coming up on your agenda, as well as the legal counsel. So is this an appropriate time to speak of those, or will you be accepting public input?
So I think
at
as we
this point?
talked for the ADU stuff, certainly can have you come join the conversation when we get to that portion of the agenda if you want to stick around.
I will be around.
But for the other portion, if you want to give your, we received your written comments today.
Yes,
so,
you did. I want to make one clarification on that. My name is Diab Jarius. I am a member of the planning board. I am not here as a representative of the board. The board has not had a chance to meet as a body to review the responses. As Chair said, I sent a rather verbose and long-winded memo to you all. I did say one thing in there which I think needs to be corrected, and that I thought that the switch from a flat fee to a per hour fee was at the request of the select board. Apparently that was not at the request of the board, so that was a misunderstanding on my part. I'm here, I really just want to reiterate how closely the planning board works with town council. We do consider them to be our partner when we work on things, and we bring them in very early in the process, and we really want to continue with that sort of a relationship. And the other thing I want to point out very quickly is that when I looked through when I listened to the responses in the interview, I should say, and I looked at the responses, the written responses to the RFP, I think all of these firms are well qualified to represent this town, but I don't see that we gain anything special. I didn't hear anything special about how they would approach planning or land use issues that would be of concern to us. In particular, I didn't notice anything they said which would change the way we dealt with possible legal issues with our decisions in the planning board, which I think was of concern to this board. I think that we have been well advised as to what the role of the planning board is, and it's the framework of the planning of the zoning. And so I think that we are currently well served by current town council, and that's pretty much all I need to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Diab. Anyone else for public comment? Heather?
Thank you very much. I didn't actually know I only had 3 minutes because I thought my feedback was being requested. But so just overall, I did review the RFP, the responses. I also went back through all the documents and information that town meeting has been provided regarding legal. I was at the interviews last week, and also I'm back in 2016 when we made the transition as an active part of that process. So all of the firms, obviously, that you chose to interview are very well respected in the field of municipal law. When reviewing the 5 firms' experiences and the team's compositions, I did think that A&K is the best fit into Winchester's dynamic. They could clearly elaborate how their firm supports our government and the issues areas and that are important to the success of our government, our residents, and town meeting. Many of the other firms did not have a grasp on Winchester's ethos, nor did they review the legal documents provided to them in the request for proposals, the town charter, the town bylaws, town zoning bylaws, or a town meeting warrant, to the level I would have anticipated interviewing for a contract up to $480,000. You cannot fake it to make it at town meeting, worth me. They didn't read the laws. Further, many of the suggestions made during the interviews have already been commenced in the last 6 years by A&K. I know, as I worked with legal counsel on 53G, consent agendas, affordable housing planning, as did you. And I did not hear or read anything that was innovative or separated those firms away from each other or ahead of A&K. Given that the questions were prepared and the firms had time to review them, I would have anticipated more from the 4 firms to be able to warrant a legal counsel change. In response to services and experiences specific for town meeting, I'm aware that this time we have one of the most respected lawyers in the state around representative town meeting. As I'd like to say, he's established that expertise with Winchester, and from us, he actually gained that knowledge and expertise from working with Lexington and Concord. They are extremely well-respected town meetings and are held to a very high standard in the Commonwealth. They're also very complicated, as driven by their members and traditions similar to our meeting. When reviewing the other firms for their services and experience for town meeting, I was underwhelmed in comparison. Town meeting is a very unique form of government and carries great significance to the town's continual success. There's very little discussion of their services to town meeting, even though it was one of the 3 bullet points in your RFP. I was taken aback when one of the firms noted that they actually help sponsors write arguments in favor of articles for town meeting, as also town council. Another only discussed who they represent in open town meeting and either did not research Winchester's town meeting structure or used a boilerplate response. Further, it was fascinating to hear from A&K in their interview discussing ways that the select board and staff can reduce costs, and also hearing statements by the select board members. I heard 2 reasons for driving costs, which FinCom also informed town meeting about in their 2022 spring town meeting written report. 1 is litigation, 2 is the level of the A&K involvement. Starting with litigation, I'm going to briefly speak as a prior planning board chair. We can minimize the impact and cost through upfront legwork, as Mr. Mercurius mentioned in his interview. For example, the Fells Hardware site development, when that decision was created, I walked my board painstakingly through every criteria in our zoning laws so we could define how the project met or did not meet the laws of the town. Mr. Mercurius was part of the process early on, so the planning board could define a clear decision, which was made easier in the litigation. There is no perfect lever to pull that will stop litigation, nor a specific firm. To actually address this cost is not a change in law firms, but to have a more collaborative discussion and create the town's legal work strategy plan as FinCom requested this spring. Multi-board and committee discussions are critical to the effectiveness of the plan. Without a collaborative process, the select board will not be able to define the real holes and weaknesses in the work of town government, which are driving costs so that progress can be created in the area of reducing and minimizing the impact of litigation. Returning back to the speaking as the moderator, the second reason for driving costs is the high involvement of legal and town government actions. From my perspective, it is less about the legal team being inefficient, but that of our boards and committees being extremely efficient and following through on many years of planning and feedback to build a stronger community. Our town meeting warrants since 2017 show the increased level of work being produced and reviewed by council. For example, your own board's work, there's an increase in real estate transactions, requests for proposals, and affordable housing-based initiatives being considered by town meeting. To address the increased productivity and output of boards and committees, I return to the recommendation of a legal work strategy plan going forward to help identify and address this area. The town meeting team has a comfort with working with A&K. I know lead counsel will be honest and direct. He cannot be persuaded to one person's individual wants over that of the law, and will stand his ground solidly to hold that ethical line. Mr. Mercurius, with his vast knowledge of the laws and the legal cases that further provide depth to the laws of the Commonwealth, has worked very hard for town meeting, and in the feedback I have received, the majority of the members trust him. I trust him. He's also extremely efficient in his use of time. He has a rare ability in lawyers to retain and retrieve information quickly, including case law at a rapid speed and with accuracy. At this time, I am unable to distinguish if the same is true of others that were interviewed. In conclusion, I would like to see town leadership collaborate and create a legal work strategy plan that includes its creation alongside all the boards and committees that use town council. I believe at this time it would be detrimental to our legislative government to change legal counsel to the other four firms at this time without a much more open and inclusive process and more internal review taking place of our own actions. As the appointment of Winchester's legal counsel is your authority, this decision impacts the work of many boards, committees, and my town meeting. From the moderator's view, it is imperative for town meeting that town council is trusted by not only town meeting, but also all the boards and committees beyond the select board. There is no indication provided that another firm would be stronger than Anderson Krieger at this time or be better to serve town meeting. Once again, I appreciate your time and thank you for your service to the town of Winchester. Thank you for giving me my full time.
Sure. Thank you, Heather. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing no one, we will move along in the agenda. Go to our business agenda. The first matter on our business agenda is the Manchester Field Track Shed donation. So, not sure who's here. Mr. Manganaro, come on up. Oh, that's
That's the
wrong one,
Patty.
Patty. I don't think, that's the
Can
next
you
one.
just talk about this for a while?
Absolutely. Where should I start?
You're actually the easier one.
That looks like the right one.
There you go.
Good evening.
Hi.
Paul Manganaro, 11 Pilgrim Drive.
Jason Kajputi, the head outdoor and indoor track coach at Winchester High School.
Thanks for coming.
Having us.
We're hoping to present you with a plan for a new shed down at the track and field facility on at Manchester Field. Coach Kajputi's been working on it for several years. We have several pledges from track alumni and interested folks in town to support this project, which would replace the big container that's down there now, that's on the budget of the school committee. It would be 100% donation in kind, and it's really needed, and Jason can walk you through the slideshow and tell you why.
Great.
Thank you. So this is our current container right now. It's long but not very wide. Costs $100 a month out of our athletic department budget. And as you're going to see in the next photos, it's very inefficient and at times unsafe for our athletes to be moving equipment in and out. We have one entryway, which then we have to unlock the emergency gate to get into, and that gate in itself scratches up the track on a regular basis, the way we have to open it to get our equipment in and out. This is where it looks right now. Doesn't look too bad until you get a little bit deeper look. This is what we either have to pull out of the way or crawl over to get things. And then here's a picture of approximately 70 hurdles that we have to move to access equipment further back in the shed, which those hurdles then have to either be put in last, or if they're put in first, the high jump mats go in front of them, then those have to move the next day to access the hurdles. This is a picture of a proposed picture of what the shed would look like. It would be a centered door, so we could store bigger equipment to the right and the left, which both pieces of equipment could be accessed without having to move the others. And just some other pictures, already spoken to Jen Levantino, the art department chair, about working with art students who are either on the track team or not, about creating murals and different things to place onto the shed. Again, just something else we can put on the back of it. This is what it would look like if it was in place. Roughly the spacing and position, could be adjusted, but that would be the idea of what it would be. It would access directly onto the track, so we wouldn't have to open the emergency gate anymore. It would be clear of the track, And we also could position it so that it would be difficult for the youngsters who are currently climbing the fence and getting on top of the container on a regular basis to actually do that. This is just kind of a proposal of what it would be a more efficient, safe layout. So this is some of the things that we have right now. We'd also have a loft, and we would be able to hang a lot of our equipment along the walls as well with the high jump mats on one side. We have a lot of power and strength equipment that are tucked away and hard to get to, and all the hurdle carts, block carts would be in another area that we could access very easily without having to move anything else. Just last piece, what is needed, level area, 3 to 6 inches of 3/4 inch crushed stone, has to be 1 foot wider than the width and the length of the shed. We've looked into Reed's Ferry, seeing that they tend to be the best built shed, the one that could last us the longest. They would build it in the factory and assemble it on site. We've already spoken to Mr. Gill, and we have their support to be able to help us with this piece of it, the removal of the fence and the leveling of the area.
And prior to this visit, we did go to the school committee probably about 2 weeks ago, and we got a 5-0 vote supporting this project and the design. So I guess tonight we're looking for your approval, so we can go back to the donors and tell them we can move forward with the project.
Great. What's your proposal for the lights?
That's coming next.
Well, thank you both. Any questions from board members?
That looks good. Approve it.
Yeah, I think so. I know there's a lot of talk about redoing the turf and the fencing around that area, sprucing that up a little bit and doing some landscaping. So I think this, from an aesthetics point of view, would really be a good fit.
You got some basketball court put pressure on you?
Yeah,
They
they
look
did.
nice down here. So you gotta look good.
You gotta try and make the whole thing look nice. And the track team, believe it or not, is, one of the probably most, biggest roster, I would say, out of any program at the high school. Because, there's several different events and there's something there for everybody, fat kids, skinny kids, slow kids. And I was one of the fat, slow kids, so I can say that. But what's your enrollment in the?
We had 159 total this spring.
Which is by far the largest program, so we're shooting many needs as well as sprucing up the area and making it practical.
Yeah, for me, this is also a safety thing. You mentioned the kids climbing on that. I can't tell you how many kids have climbed. I've heard one story where someone got stuck up there and the police had to come and pull them down. So definitely, less enticing for kids to climb on it. Certainly looks, better, fits the area, fits what we're doing, especially, the upgrades that have been going on down there. So certainly makes sense. So I think the board tonight would be voting to authorize the work to go forward and then accepting
Right, so this would
donation
be
in kind.
a gift in kind, so I think kind of the sense of the board to move forward, and then be a vote after the construction to formally accept it as a donation to the town. I just wanted to mention that you just need to coordinate with Elaine Vreeland for the Conservation Commission, because this might be in a jurisdictional area, so just want to make sure
Okay, thank you.
you
Yeah.
work with her a little bit. Yep.
Any other thoughts? No? Everyone think this is a good idea?
Sounds great to me.
Do we want to take a formal vote, or?
Might
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
That's fine, yep.
Do you want to make a motion?
Yes, and we're authorizing the Winchester High School and track and field team.
Well, I guess it's school committee land, so I think we would be just signaling our approval for the project.
So
I think
Authorize the town manager to work with the school committee to.
Yep, that's probably a better idea.
I move that we authorize the town manager to work with the school committee for installation of the Manchester Field Track Shed donation.
And accept it, right? Do we have to formally accept
The
it? Or?
acceptance would be after the construction.
Oh, after the construction,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you very much. I just had one question. So what our next step would obviously be secure the funds, and before we start with construction, is there anybody we should notify or?
I would check with Elaine Vreeland
Right.
at Concom.
Okay, that would be our contact.
Beth can be your go-between for all that, and I don't know if, does her building, does?
Yeah, I mean,
On DPW for the fence.
Right, so the fence will be done as part of, assuming we move forward with the field project, would be done as part of the field project.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I would talk to Al Weil and Elaine.
Okay.
Start with those two.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Happy to help coordinate.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks. Next on the agenda is the Davidson Park presentation.
I can kick this one off. So we were before you a couple months ago. We were happy to receive funding through the NRD Industrialplex. Basically, these were funds that were resulted from the damage caused by the Industrialplex project, and there was the Natural Resources Trustee Council solicited projects from both Winchester and Woburn who were impacted by the Superfund site, a civil action project, and they allocated over $4.25 million to our two communities. We were given money to look at Davidson Park, up to $500,000. We got a first allocation to complete what we're here tonight to discuss, which is a feasibility study. Neil Price is here from Horsley Witten, who is the engineering firm that we've been working with, and Catherine Pedamonte from the Mystic River Watershed Association as well is here. So,
great, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth. I will quickly give a bit of a history of the project and the site, because I know many members of this board were not around. This project began in 2013 with many starts and stops along the way. So start with a little project history. So here's the earliest map that we were able to find from 1854 of the site, with the site being shown in red. This is very minimal development, so the site itself is natural. You can see the river, and I ask you to kind of, in your mind's eye, remember the shape of the river there, because you'll come back and see it again a little bit later. The site of the Winchester Hospital Annex is a mill at this point, and you can see a race taking water from the Aberjona River through the mill and connecting back in just upstream of the park. Interestingly, news to me, there's that giant pond wetland area and the site of the former Atlantic Jelly, now Vale Development, that clearly was filled in order to build that at some point in the past. Next up, in 1893, most of the housing, well, the plan was made in 1893, but in the decades following that, most of the housing in the immediate area around Brookside Ave and all of that were built. And you can see what's happened here is the river has been pulled hard to the backs of those houses along Brookside and straightened at this point. And here's a picture on the left is an aerial photo showing that straightened river. And this is actually showing the beginning of work on the site for the turning it into a park, which we'll get to next year. So the park was created between 1932 and 1936. Landscape design by Herbert Kellaway, who was a disciple of Olmsted. It's named after George Davidson, Parks Commissioner, for a very long time in the early days of the 20th century. We'll come back to this picture again, but this is what the park looked like at completion in the late 1930s. Under construction, interesting photo of, again, so the houses on Brookside are in the background. You can see the mill building of the current hospital annex on the far right. Some of the graves visible for the cemetery on the upper left. And this is the basin being dredged for turning the river into the pond that it became as part of the park. The completed park again, so very well, beautiful manicured park with the pond, stone-lined ways, a couple of footbridges. You can see the overgrowth or the forest, the mature tree canopy was much less than, so it was a clear view of the cemetery. There's some paths on the left that aren't there anymore, going up onto the hillside. And you can see the tributary coming in from the left of the picture, unnamed tributary that comes in across the railroad tracks. It's currently in a culvert. From what we can see of at least this picture, when the park was created in the 30s, that seems to have been, at least at this part of it, open to daylight. Today, the park is a little less than 10 acres. It's got diverse habitat and wildlife. The bikeway goes through there. the pond, the dug impounded pond, has been filling in steadily with sediment as happens. Rivers carry sediment downstream. The water slows when it comes into a pond, the sediment drops out. The pond was dredged once, to our knowledge, in 1970, possibly before then, but there's no records of that. Has not been dredged since then. There would be records if it was dredged since then. So by the mid-late 90s, sediment was already becoming a problem. So we're talking about something less than 30 years for the river to drop enough sediment in to fill the pond up or begin filling the pond up. So this is the start of the process that I began with Beth and Meg and others in 2013. What do we do with this situation of a nice manicured open pond becoming filled with sediment, invasive species, not as a visually enticing area as it used to be. So that project, which spanned a little less than 3 years, included a bunch of existing conditions information survey, wetland resource delineation, invasive species and habitat. We sampled sediment. There's a concern about the quality of the sediment in there due to the upgrading and Superfund sites. We did some hydraulic modeling, came up with 3 different conceptual designs at the 10% level, and then advanced the two more favored of those to the 30% level. So the 3 10% concept designs were restore the park to something approximating how it was in the late 30s after the park was originally built, so a big open water dredged pond. The second was turn the park back into something more like the river it was before the park was created, which would be a lower maintenance, almost self-sustaining approach rather than trying to create an environment that doesn't really want to be there. And the third was a hybrid. So we heard a lot from people who like open water. So was there a way to incorporate some open water into the river design? There was a working group primarily that consisted of town staff as well as immediate abutters in a public meeting that was primarily attended by immediate abutters. And those groups selected 1 and 3 as the 2 options that were advanced to the 30% design level. And there the project sat for several years. In 2018, this NRD grant that Beth mentioned at the beginning came to light as an option for us, so we pursued applying for that grant with the NRD staff, and we were fortunate to receive the funding that Beth mentioned, up to $500,000 for this project, with the catch being that the only option they will fund is the river restoration option, which, as you just remember, was the one that was not the least publicly supported from the limited public outreach that was conducted during the initial study. So the point of what we've been doing since then, and the point of tonight's meeting is there public support for pursuing this riverine option, given the fact that it's, if we want this money, it's this option or none. It's really as simple as I can say it, is that's what we have. So the lion's share of the work we've been doing this spring is public outreach, led by Catherine from Mystic River Watershed Association, who's behind me here, and I'll be happy to answer questions. It consisted of public meetings at the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, this one here tonight. They developed a web page with information on the project, and outreached a survey so people could give their opinions on various questions about how they use the park, how they like the park, etc. They got almost 200 responses. We had an open house in May with a picture shown here. We had about 40 to 50 people show up and talk to all of us about the project and its history and their likes and dislikes and desires. Outreach emails were sent. We had a virtual public meeting about 2 weeks ago with approximately 40 attendees where we presented much of this information I'm presenting you again here tonight. The results of that outreach, all of that cumulative outreach put together, there's a complicated pie chart, but really what it comes down to as people generally use the park for relaxing, informal, passive recreation activities, picnicking, hanging out, having the kids run around, walking their dogs. There's not a whole lot of organized sports. There's a little. We heard about a school nearby that sometimes brings kids over to do some theater and some sports, but in general, it's a fairly passive, relaxed use of the park. We asked a lot about lawn grass, because you'll see coming up, one of the questions about the restoration is, do we keep all the lawn that's there now, or do we allow some of it to go back to wetlands surrounding a river restoration? And the results of the survey for lawn use were, again, mostly passive recreation activities on the lawn, not a whole lot of like big sports stuff, which makes sense. I mean, there's Leonard Field, there's the sports there's a lot of other places to play soccer, et cetera, besides here. So given that feedback, we created actually 2 conceptual designs that I'll show you momentarily that are consistent with the NRD grant requirements for river restoration. The only variance in the public opinion that we received in the feedback process was, to what extent do we want a habitat-based wildlife restoration as opposed to some more park-like amenities? And the more park-like amenities would be things like maintain view sheds of the river, formal walking paths on both sides of the river, rebuilding the northern footbridge so that you can walk all the way around. Exactly how much lawn we want to keep or not keep. So those are the only areas of open for contention, and they don't need to be decided now or even any time in the near future. They can be explored as we move forward in this process. So there were some constraints that I should mention about the design, of course. One, the obvious is the Tri-City bike path was recently rebuilt within about the past 5 or 6 years, I believe. So we really didn't want to go trying to move that further apart. So that created a hard stop for what we could do with river restoration on the western side of the park. We have the fact that at the upgradient side, so on the right of this picture coming off of Washington Street, the town owns a very narrow strip of land in between the hospital property on the top side on the north and other undeveloped hospital property on the south side. So there's really no room to do much of anything in there besides continue to have the river in a channel that, in all honesty, is far too narrow and far too straight for what that river ought to be to behave properly. So that creates hydraulic properties that we just have to live with. You know, the water will be coming through that stretch far too fast and carrying far too much sediment, but there's really, given the property constraints on either side, there's nothing that can be done about that other than to try to harden those shorelines so that they don't erode any further. And that leaves us having to absorb the energy. So hard shorelines carry the energy forward. So we'll have to absorb that energy further down in the park. So that's that. Because of the contamination issues that I mentioned, which are not a deal killer, there is contamination, but it's under jurisdiction of EPA as part of the Superfund site. The entire river corridor is part of the Superfund site, so EPA has to decide on any actions that happen along that. So anything we do will have to get their approval, but it seems likely that a restoration design that reduces people's exposure to contaminated sediment would be approved by EPA, and that would be the intention here, is to try to cover higher concentrations of metals with lower concentration sediments. So that is that you see the middle arrow. Oh, I can show you right here. So this little pool here. So I should point out that the river is sort of, as this thing fills in, it's taking on this shape that should look strikingly familiar to you as the one from the 1854 map. So it's very interesting that despite having been dug out into a big pond and 100+ years later, the river wants to go back to what it was beforehand. And that's science, that's hydraulics, that's just, you know, the morphology of the river is doing what it does. So we've chosen not to fight that. So the designs you'll see build off of this to try to limit earth movement there. Again, so this is just showing that same concept. Here's the 1854 map, here's the concept design that we're developing, the more habitat-based one, with the river following essentially the same shape as it did in 1854. The channel sized appropriately for the flow it's going to carry, and surrounded by wetlands. So all natural river systems have bordering vegetated wetlands around them. So when the water rises in the river, it floods over on the banks into these wetlands, and that stores flood capacity, protects downgradient properties from flooding. It's part of the system, right? And it's part of the system that was lost when the park was created. So the idea is, to the extent we can, given the constraints with space, we recreate wetlands around the river. And by necessity, that takes up some lawn space. So that's the trade-off that we're balancing here. So we've got the deepest wetlands. This is a wet meadow shown in this light green color. A wetland called shrub swamp. So it's a kind of low shrubs. It's not super wet, medium wetness. And then the highest elevations, and by this elevation gradient is a matter of inches going from the river heading upwards. There's a forested wetland here in green, and then you go to upland around that. So there's a hydraulic gradient being shown. I said everything about the design in that last slide, but this is that. So that with all those same wetlands things, I'm going to point out that this also includes. This is the habitat focus one. So we're maximizing the habitat and wetlands and minimizing the park within narrow confines. So this includes daylighting that tributary I mentioned, coming across the railroad tracks, and that would involve an extra bridge for the bike path or a culvert to get across that. Minimal, so the lawn on the southeast side of the river gets diminished. So this would be less use for big lawn area, that we maintain all the lawn over on this west side, but less use on this side in this focus. If we went to a more park-based focus, we'd maintain more lawn over this side. We might, build up this footbridge again to allow people to travel around. We might allow for, a more formal footpath, walking path on this side. We might maintain some view sheds across the river, add some more benches and so forth. So these are all things that can be considered as we move forward. And I guess that's the end of that. So really, as I mentioned, the point tonight before you is to vote if, you hearing the public feedback that was received, if the board supports a general river restoration design that might be one of these two concepts or something in between them or shared elements, but most importantly, not be open water. So if the board votes to proceed with that, we would present that to the NRD folks, and we anticipate that they would then approve further funding for the project to move the design forward further.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Beth, did you have anything you want to add, or?
No, I think that was it, really. Just, we're kind of at that decision point right now where we need to, if we're gonna move forward with the NRD program, we need to kind of have some momentum from the board to push us there.
Great. Questions from the board members?
What's gonna change? I mean, I walked through there, I walked from there to the quarter wind factory, the hospital, and we walked through some woods, and it's sort of nice on the left-hand side when you get off of Cross Street. Then you get like a swampy kind of river thing happening there. So what's gonna change? What's gonna be noticeable?
To be honest, very little noticeably different. There'd be less invasive species. Part of the restoration design would be a targeted removal of invasive species. What we're proposing is really just an acceleration of the natural processes that are going on anyway. If we walked away from this park and left it, it would do this in, 50 years, 100 years. So this process is just accelerating that to get through the growing pains to a more final spot faster. So
But you're gonna do some dredging, so
dredging is probably not the right word. Reworking of sediment, movement of sediment. So both of these concepts would not involve movement of any sediment off-site. They would just be moved so some lawn area would be cut down a little bit, and that would be moved to fill in. So this is a low spot right now. If you remember the pictures, it's a mud flat. So that would be raised up a little bit to make it this wet meadow and planted with the appropriate vegetation and so forth. So really, we would just be moving some sediment from high locations to lower locations, creating stabilized banks, and not dredging. No, the pond option would have involved dredging, and that's not on the table in either.
So from a people use thing, so this is more an ecological.
It is definitely more of an ecological
than it is a resident enjoyment. Not that we shouldn't have. I respect all that. Just
right.
Leonard Pond's going to keep getting filled in because the sediment just goes under the street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think at the level we're at right now, that's the decision point, right? when we drill down into the details of like, should we have another footbridge? Should we have a walking path here? Should we have viewpoints here? That's when we'll get into the specifics of like user experience, I guess. But overall, it's gonna look a lot more like it looks today in terms of being a river, as opposed to trying to take it back to what it looked like in 1932, which is an unsustainable way to, have what wants to be a river. Right? We'll be back here in 30 years needing to dredge it.
Yeah,
again.
and the costs for dredging just get higher and higher, and particularly in a partially contaminated environment such as this. So there's in this environment we're in, there's a lot of public funding for ecological restoration projects such as this one. There's no public funding for dredging projects.
Dredging Superfund sites.
Yeah. Brian?
Is there any maintenance that long-term would have to be done? Like, what is the impact?
The idea is it would be essentially self-sustaining from a sediment transport point of view. So the only maintenance would be kind of the normal park maintenance for less complicated parks. So the lawns would still need to be mowed for the areas that you wanted to be lawn. If view sheds were desired, so that's another higher maintenance item, right? View sheds would need to be maintained. If you chose a design, or if everyone chose a design without view sheds, then that maintenance goes away. Invasive species don't get eliminated in one fell swoop. So during the construction, they would be gotten rid of to the extent they can, but as we all know, you've got to stay on top of that forever, essentially. So if the desire is to keep invasive species from coming back, someone has to be working at that forever. And that's not just here, that's anywhere.
So I attended the meeting the other week, and I heard a couple comments about how this might change the behavior when we have heavy rains and this area tends to flood, particularly for the abutters in the Brookside neighborhood.
Right. So the entire park is within the 100-year floodplain. So nothing that we do here will change the big flood dynamics. The town, Beth has tell you all about and I'm sure you know all about the town-wide projects to help address that. This won't help that at all. For the lower frequency events, things like maybe 1-year storms, 2-year storms, we can probably make things a little bit better with this than the current conditions are.
I know a lot of what we hear is it looks like the river might be moving a little bit closer to people's houses as opposed to kind of where it is in an open water scheme. It's really based on elevation, not proximity. So the elevations aren't changing because we're in a floodplain. We can't fill in the floodplain. So it really, even though it looks like maybe the river is moving a little closer, the flooding impact is the same, if that makes sense.
Other questions? So I think, Beth, you'd be looking for us to approve this.
Yeah, I mean, I think to just endorse in concept a riverine option out there, and then should we move into the next phase with the NRD folks, that would be where we have more detail coming in.
Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think it's great. Thank you so much, and I'm glad that there was such a involved public process with this as well. I mean, unfortunately, the initial recommendations were, kind of set aside, but I think it really supports the interest in the whole project and the final outcome. And to Mariana's point about the maintenance, that was something that I was, concerned about too. Does NRD also, do they consider anything kind of above that number? Or it seems like they would, if they're investing in something, that they would want it to be preserved as well, or maybe they don't care, I don't know.
So the money, this is probably a $3 million construction project.
Yeah, I'm not, so we initially estimated this in 2015 at about $2 million, but that included, even the river option then included removal of sediment off-site. So that's the most expensive part. With these designs not including any of that, the cost will come down from that standpoint. However, it's now 10 years later, so every cost in the world has gone up
So
exorbitantly.
we're at least $2 million.
It might just still be
yeah.
$2 million.
So the NRD money, we can get up to, I think, $500,000 or $600,000, which will hopefully take us through design or most of
and then some, yeah.
Great. So We wouldn't be able to construct it with the with NRD funding unless some of their projects that they funded in other areas either have excess money or don't move forward, then maybe they'd have something to reconsider. But as Neil said, this is the type of project that there's a lot of people looking to help fund, so I think we'd be well positioned to try to leverage that design work for future grant money.
Yeah, there tends to be, once a project gets some money behind it, it sort of gets wings, and other granting agencies want to get behind it and see it forward, so, yeah. Hopefully that's one of these projects. Right.
And something like the CPA would be able to fund something like this, we think, or,
Nina's not.
I don't want to jump
yeah.
in, but
Yeah, Mike, I mean, this is the kind of thing that,
Right,
you know,
yep.
is perfectly designed for. So. Any other discussion? Hearing nothing, I think we would entertain a motion, or someone want to make it?
Yes, I move we approve the town manager, move forward with the Riverine options for working with NRD to fund the design for the Davison Park study.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Anyone opposed? Nope. Great.
Yay.
Thank you very much for coming
you.
in.
Thank you
for the
Thanks, Neil
presentation.
and Catherine.
All right. Next on the agenda is an ARPA funding update. If you recall, or was it our last meeting, or 2 meetings ago, or 3 meetings ago? We had the municipal side present a proposal to use some ARPA money towards municipal projects. And we had our staff put forth a list. We had discussion about that list, and we asked some follow-up questions on different projects and some action items for our staff to undertake. Again, this is just the municipal side of the ARPA requests. I know there are other private entities out there with ARPA requests, school department, and other considerations. So we're starting with this. And so Beth, I don't know if you have any updates for
Sure.
the projects. I know the one project that seems to be the furthest along is the turf field replacement. So feel free to take us through all these.
Sure. So there's a lot in my memo in terms of small updates. I won't, just in the interest of time, I won't go through those.
Yep. 2
things that I did want to talk about. First, at the last meeting, the board approved money for 3 broadband projects. And in speaking with the comptroller after that vote, we'd appreciate if the board would just re-vote it so that the money can be used as a pool as opposed to 3 individual projects, because our fire department will be doing a lot of the work on overtime, and we'll be buying the materials in bulk that we'll use for all 3 projects. And so just from an accounting standpoint, it would just be easier if it was re-voted as one pool of money as opposed to 3 separate. So I think I gave Anthea, if you're okay with it.
Yeah, why don't we stop there?
Sure.
And see if any board members have any questions about that. It's really an accounting thing. If not, then maybe we can entertain a motion to re-vote that.
Yep, I move that the select board rescind the vote taken on Thursday, June 2nd, 2022, which approved ARPA funding for the $50,000 Morocco School redundant broadband project, the $70,000 transfer station broadband project, and the $25,000 Town Hall Jenks fiber connection project. Furthermore, that the select board approve ARPA funding for a combined Morocco transfer station, Town Hall, and Jenks Center broadband fiber connection project in the amount of $145,000.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none? Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now on to the Manchester field turf replacement project. So the field is in need of a new carpet. We met last week with designer Chris Huntress, who's been working with the recreation department to look at a new set of plans for the site, as well as the athletic department. And so they basically have a set of plans that are almost ready to go. They've recommended that we use what's called a Brock fill product instead of crumb rubber. The Brock fill product is an engineered wood particle that helps to improve traction and reduce heat, which is certainly an issue on artificial turf fields. They've used it successfully in other communities in Massachusetts, including Drake in Marblehead. So,
Beth, do you know how long it's been? Can you find out how long it's been used for? It's
Sure.
been like 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, I think
concerned about durability.
I think Drake has been in use for in that order 2 or 3 years, and the athletic director was gonna go out and meet with, the AD up there as well, just to see, get their impression.
It's my understanding that the cost is the same. There's no difference in cost, whether it's the crumb rubber or the Brockville. It's just a preference. And obviously, you know, I think Brockville is something that's been used in warmer climates. You know, and it's starting to make its way here in New England as well. Sorry.
So in addition to the carpet replacement, we're also gonna be looking at some fence replacements and netting upgrades. Our recommendation is that those items be bid as alternates, just in case costs come in higher than we expect. At this point, we're hoping, should the board move forward this evening, we're hoping to bid the project in early July with an August bid opening timeframe. And we worked with the AD director with the idea that construction would start October 1st and be completed by November 15th, which would hopefully, fingers crossed, allow us to have the Thanksgiving Day football game at the field. So we did get an updated cost estimate from Chris after our meeting last week, or 2 weeks ago at this point. The current cost is for, with construction admin services, is $980,000, $550. Includes a 10% contingency as well. We have worked with the Recreation Department, and the Fields Management Committee actually approved using $50,000 from the synthetic field revolving fund to go towards this project. And we've also have a commitment from the Winchester Sports Foundation for a $100,000 donation from the project. So appreciative of those efforts. And so at this point, our request is for $550 from ARPA funds for the project. Obviously, that would be adjusted based on the final bid price that comes in, but that's our estimate at this point.
Okay. Questions? Discussion? Go ahead.
Thanks, Rich. Seems great to me. I'm glad that we were able to have the donation from the Sports Foundation and to pull some money in from the revolving fund. I think that I'm sure we'll see that revolving fund grow more down the road as well, and be able to supplement the maintenance of the fields too. I think that my daughter's played on the Brockville stuff, and I was actually surprised. It was very good. It even rained in the middle of the game, and they stopped for a little while and started again, and it was completely, fine. Didn't absorb water or anything like that. Very small wood chips. Nobody got cut up or anything like that. So it seems like a good kind of sustainable, healthy, fill, if that's what people want to go with. The only other kind of add alternate, I know that the costs are high here, that I would suggest is if we, while we're kind of doing a lot of work around Manchester Field, is we take a look at some water filling stations there. I don't know, if there really is any over in that area for kids to have access, but we have a lot of sports activities there. Skate park, the track, soccer, football, basketball, and I don't know where the water lines are around there, but might be a good time for us to take a look while we're doing a little digging. And I did walk the field the other night as well, and I was really surprised at the condition of the field. It's horrible. It's not safe from my perspective. So I'm glad that we're addressing this. Every year we keep saying, oh, next year it's going to, we're going to have to really address this, and there doesn't seem to be the money for it. So it's certainly a priority. It looks a lot different when you're up close on the field than when you are in the stands. And it's, I think we've done a good job of extending the life of it, but I think now is the time. So I appreciate this and certainly support it.
Thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree that it's definitely a need. Have we looked at, last time we talked about other funding sources? And because long-term, we're going to need more money in that revolving fund to replace Skillings, and then to replace this one in 15 years or however long it takes. So whether advertisements like we have at Newtown Field, and I know we have future agenda items. We have the field lighting policy, and I know that the current lighting policy is it's an issue as far as being able to rent that field out. Yeah, if we could look at what partnerships we can have with local businesses that want to advertise just like they do at Newtown Field, and be able to put more money into the revolving funds. Long term, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
While we do the fencing and all of that.
Absolutely, yeah, I know, we've talked quite a bit with the recreation director, and he's very committed to enhancing the revenue they can generate, so, that's a good idea with the advertising.
It's a good point. I think when the field was put in, over a decade ago, that was the idea, right? We would be able to fund the replacement through these type of mechanisms. It really never got off the ground, and I think, the light policy maybe affected that a bit. But, going forward, we're fortunate to be in this situation, but going forward, we've got Skillings, that's, 5 years old at this point, I think, at least, maybe 7, or 5. And then, we will have this field, in, 10 or 15 years. This field, when it first opened up, I mean, talk about overuse, right? I mean, this thing was overused. Skilling seems a little bit more controlled, but, eventually they're gonna have to be replaced, and it'll be great to have this fund, and I think your points are well taken. I think all those items should be on the table, and going forward.
In 10 or 15 years, I hope we don't have another pandemic that ends up with, $6 million in funding for the town, right?
Yeah, we have 7 to 8 years left on Skillings.
So to your point, we did, the town manager's office did speak to the Sports Foundation. They did speak to, the Fields Management Committee, and, with those generous gifts, it does defray some of the costs, but it's still a very expensive project. One of the things, is timing of this, right? So the field can only be installed when it's above 40
degrees and rising.
in
so,
rising, yeah. So if we miss this window, it's not, it's likely a late spring or summer window, and next year. So, I think that there was a big meeting here. The athletic director, town manager's office, Meg White was here, Board of Health. Officer Board of Health, Jen Murphy. And, they all came to this consensus. So it was a good collaborative effort. It was a good meeting, and kind of led us to this point. So at this point, we'd be looking to move forward with this. And I think some of the ad alternates that people have mentioned, are certainly worthwhile to explore, especially the water ball filling stations. I was down there for the Bob Bigelow dedications, and it was a hot summer day, and having water ball filling stations in that area would be nice, as well as the turf itself. Turf gets hot.
Yeah, somebody passed out, right?
Someone
it was
passed
that
out
hot.
over there, yeah.
It was-
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So, and they were screaming, "Does anyone have water?" So, any other thoughts? All right. So at this point, we'd be looking to move forward with this project. If there would, certainly if someone wanted to make a motion, we'd entertain it.
So I move we approve ARPA funding in the amount of $830,550 for the replacement of synthetic turf on Manchester Field.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No, it's unanimous. Great, thank you, Beth.
Thank
And
you.
you'll, it looks like, from your memo, that, we'll have further updates at our next meeting on
Yep,
some of
there's
the
a
other
few other
projects that
projects
were
we have in
talked
the
about.
works.
Yep.
Yep.
And just, so everyone knows, the school committee's been consulted on this. They certainly, since it's a maintenance project, they feel we can just proceed with it. But they've been involved, Dr. Hackett and the chair of the school committee have been involved in these discussions as well. So, while we're on the topic of the lights, and I did just mention the school committee, we do have a future agenda item, the Manchester Field lighting policy. If you read the policy, there's certain actions that both the school committee and the select board need to take. First, field management needs to come up with a new light policy, and then that needs to be brought forward between both boards and a vote of both boards. In talking to Michelle Bergstrom, who's now the chair of the school committee, we thought it made sense maybe to have, one public meeting with both boards present over Zoom, so that, everyone could participate. They had loosely mentioned, they have a meeting on July 12th, which is a Tuesday. So it would be via Zoom, but if that works for our board, we could certainly have that discussion on that date. She was kind of looking for an answer relatively quickly so that they can get the proper notice out. And I think Beth, was your office going to handle the notices, I believe?
We can do that, yep.
Yep. So I don't know if people have that available on that date for Zoom. I don't know the exact time. It'll be in the evening. Let's say no earlier than 6.
We can do that.
All right. So I will pass that along to Michelle and see if that actually gets scheduled and let you all know. So thanks. Anything else on ARPA, Beth, at this point?
I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is fall town meeting articles. And this kind of dovetails into I think the 2 items after that. Disabled accessory dwelling units and CPA timeline. And Mina's here. Hi, Mina. Thanks for joining us. So, in my head, just, experiencing the last couple of town meetings and some issues that have arisen, this really came to light, when we were talking about, the work we had to do at the end on the sports court, for example. I thought it may make sense, early on, I don't know how early it is, but early on, to kind of identify what the board may be working towards for fall town meeting. And then, maybe send a memo out by our next meeting to town meeting members, telling them that this is what the board's working on, this is, what we'll be discussing, and to, tune into our meetings, so that, you can certainly, educate yourself and just get that early communication out there so that we can address, so we have that public involvement, that community involvement, and get, have those discussions that we had, on certain issues the last couple of town meetings up front, which I think were fruitful discussions and led to a good end result that, really, in some of these issues like the sports court, for example, carried the vote. So the idea would just be, more communication with town meeting members to make sure they understand that, this is where we're headed, this is what we're working on, so that when we get to town meeting in November, people are saying, where did this come from? Like, when did this start, being talked about? So that was my thinking. And I think, in our work plan session that we had, these 2 items came up, disabled accessory dwelling units and the CPA. And so, happy, those 2 issues have been kind of identified. I'm not sure where we're headed with those as a board, but they've just been put on the radar. I didn't know if anybody else had any other issues that you could put on the radar. I'm not gonna put you on the spot tonight, but, probably by our next meeting, we would want to identify those, and have a consensus if we're going to try to move that towards town meeting in the fall. Does that make sense? What I just said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just add Washington Swan Street parcels here.
Right. Yep, absolutely. That's definitely on the list. I don't know if other people had anything to add at this point. Certainly think about it.
Just for items for the town meeting fall in particular. The only one that we've been kicking around for a while is this Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. I know Brian's been, working with Congresswoman Clark's office on it, and it seems like it's light action for town meeting and probably not something that's terribly controversial, but seems like we're just run out of bandwidth all the time by the time we get to town meeting, and if we start now, we can get it moving.
Sure, yep.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't think the transfer station working group will come out with any town meeting action. It will be select board only action. So.
Okay. I saw the first email went out for that, so meeting. We'll keep thinking. It's never too early to start the process. So, obviously we have stuff we're working on as well, that, different projects, and we'll see, what happens with the capital, committee and things like that, but just certainly other things that come up. So these other 2 items, agenda items 5 and 6, we'll start with the accessory dwelling units. This was identified in our work plan meeting. So, we did want to, talk about that and consider, I know Mina's done some work on it. I know there's a working group, and so, Diab, if you wanted to come up and join us at the table, you're more than welcome as well.
Thank you very much.
And maybe we can start maybe with Mina, or how should we just, with Mina with what you've drafted, and then we can go from there.
Sure, and Mike gets the credit for identifying the state legislation on this. That what we drafted so far is not an attempt to regulate all accessory dwelling units or replace the work that the group is doing. But there is state legislation floating around, hasn't been acted on yet, that would add accessory dwelling units to the list of protected types of uses under zoning, like churches and group homes and some other uses in the Dover Amendment. It's not clear where it's going to go, but what we've drafted is essentially a Winchester version of that. So rather than try to identify all of the different things that you might do if you were trying to simply promote accessory dwelling units, this makes it clear that at least a limited subset of accessory dwelling units are not prohibited by the bylaw, notwithstanding any other language, which is sort of how the Dover Amendment functions for those other categories. So it tracks what the state legislation looks like. It is only for individuals, accessory dwelling units that are being used by an individual over 62 years of age. The state one is 65, but in your zoning bylaw, you define elderly as 62. Apologies to anyone who's 63. Or disabled individuals. So those, and that's as defined by state law. And then there's sort of a host of minimum requirements before, that get around any other prohibition in the bylaw, including minimum size. It's a decent sized lot. I think we started with 5,000 square feet. Again, that mirrors the state law. Can't be used for boarders, lodgers, or short-term rentals. It is limited to one per structure or lot. One per structure, and I think one per lot as well, because they can be detached, but have to be associated with it. The primary owner of the lot has to be living there, so again, can't be a landlord-tenant situation or a tenant and access situation. Connected to public sewer, water, and then there's a handful of traffic tests, basically, that doesn't generate any traffic beyond what's normally generated by a single-family home, and has adequate parking for the additional car or two, I think is the maximum, that would be there for the accessory dwelling unit. So again, it's not everything. Communities that are looking to sort of promote or design accessory dwelling units might have a whole section in the bylaw on that, and that's what I understand. Might be more of what the working group has been doing, but I'll defer to you about
Let
that.
me give you the full lowdown on the working group
So,
at the
Good
appropriate
idea.
moment. So I have a bit of a spiel. I want to talk about the working group. And I should tell you that the working group took a very hard look at this bylaw last Friday. And we have a range of comments on it, but let me first talk to you about the working group. The working group, I am the chair of the planning board, and I'm also the spokesperson for the working group. We don't have a formal hierarchy. So we're excited that the select board has decided to look at ADUs. The planning board's been looking at this for a number of years, and last fall we decided to create a working group, and that working group is composed of a number of members from town boards who have intimate knowledge and concerns about housing for the two populations that you are targeting, namely people with disabilities and our older residents. And so the working group consists of 3 members of the planning board, Sally Dale, I Ching, Scott, and myself. Felicity Tuttle represents the Housing Partnership Board. Felicity is a local real estate member or a local real estate community, has been on the Housing Partnership for a decade or so. We have Kathy Boyle from the Winchester Housing Authority. Kathy Boyle is the She's also the founder and president of Autism Housing Pathways Incorporated. She was appointed to the Massachusetts Autism Commission by Governor Charlie Baker, and she's actually part of the dream which drafted H1370 that you used as your framework. So she has very intimate knowledge about all of the reasons why that bill is written as it is. We also have Lisa Matrandola from the Disability Access Commission, who is also the Director of Disability Services at the Mass Department of Workforce Development. And we have Philip Belts, current Director of the Council of Aging. So we have reached out to a wide variety of folks who have been working on these issues for a very long time and have really intimate knowledge of how you go about crafting regulations which will help the populations that we want to help. So over the past 6 months, the ADU working group has been meeting bi-weekly, and with the goal of bringing forward an ADU zoning article to Winchester Town Meeting. We have researched a number of approaches to how that bylaw should be crafted with the intent of minimizing as much as possible restrictions so that we can make this type of housing more available. While we believe that ADUs provide housing choices which can benefit a wide range of residents at multiple points in their lives and in their household compositions, we chose to initially focus on housing for people with disabilities and our older residents. As I mentioned, our working group includes 2 members with deep knowledge of the needs of the disabled community, as well as the specific legal requirements that are put upon ADU housing to meet program and grant criteria for their residents. And this is really important because if the bylaws are not crafted correctly, then those residents will not get access to some of the support and grant services which would otherwise be available to them. And so that's why some of the language that we would recommend in a Winchester zoning bylaw differs from the sample or the draft bylaw that you've drawn up, and would actually hew much more closely to the one that came from the state. Addressing their needs and meeting legal requirements which will allow residents access to those services requires zoning which is both flexible and precise. The other thing we did when we did research is we looked at how our neighboring communities have dealt with this. In particular, what were the paths that they needed to take in order to successfully pass these sort of bylaws at town meeting. And so we decided to go through essentially a 3-pronged approach. Education, both of ourselves and of the public, the residents in town, so they understand what the framework, what the context is, research and legislation. And we should note that our neighbors in Arlington, who did recently pass a very broad ADU bylaw, only came about that after several repeated failures at town meeting, and then through a really sustained grassroots efforts to move it forward. So our education program began this spring. We had a townwide forum on ADUs. We had speakers from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and also the Director of Planning from the town of Arlington, who described in detail how they worked through the issues to get their zoning bylaw passed. So with that in mind, the ADU working group has designed a program of education, public education through this summer and fall, including public outreach and surveys, as well as a presentation at the Council on Aging Symposium this fall. So our research program consists of detailed reviews of existing bylaws, as well as those requirements of funding that I mentioned. We intend to release a report this fall, which will provide a summary of our research and include a draft bylaw as well as an explanation of how we arrived at the language and what the what the pros and cons are of the choices that the town has. Finally, we intended to, with the planning board, we intended to introduce the ADU bylaw to town meeting. We will introduce the ADU bylaw to town meeting this fall in the planning board's remark to town meeting, and we will begin the process of having it available to spring of next year. And the planning board has a slightly different schedule for bringing warrant articles to town meeting than the select board does. So for instance, for us to bring something forward for this fall's town meeting, we would already have had to have language ready for review by town council in May.
So, can I
Yeah.
just stop you for a second?
Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
understand. We have a draft here
Yes.
for an amendment to the zoning bylaw. Isn't this coming from the planning board?
No, it's coming from this board. We have not,
The responsibility for bringing articles to town meeting for zoning bylaw amendments is on the planning board, right?
well, traditionally, the planning board has done that. It is not exclusive to the planning board, but traditionally it has been done that. We first learned of this bylaw last Thursday. And so we happened to have an ADU working group meeting on Friday where we discussed it. And I have a bunch of, I guess they're blue lines or red lines, but we went over it. But the ADU working group has been working towards we originally wanted to bring something this fall, but then we realized that you need to bring this to the public. We need to have interaction with the residents, and that's impossible to do during the summer. We essentially write off July and August because you can't get people to come and talk. And we need to have a community conversation because we know there are people who are very concerned about ADUs for a variety of reasons, some of which we hope those concerns can be assuaged. But we know there have been attempts to bring ADUs to town meeting in the past. You know, this is a while ago, but they have failed. I know that I have heard comments that people are concerned about ADUs bringing crime to town. There are a number of issues that people have that we have to face. So the ADU working group has set up, I think, what is a very deliberate and sustainable program towards bringing a successful bylaw to the town. We are as anxious as anyone to bring this forward. We really are. We wish we could do that earlier, but we think that this more deliberative approach, being able to communicate well with the community, will serve us better in the long run so that we don't have to go through this multiple times to get it through. There is, as noted, there is an ADU bill before the House. It has, you know, they're hopeful, but you know, they've been through this several times. So we can't wait for them, but we certainly can learn from the language, and I can go through some of the issues that are important in terms of who the ownership is, whether or not the person with the disability lives in the primary or in the ADU, how you handle, for instance, the owner should be a trust. It's possible that if caretakers have children and the caretakers die, but then there's a trust set up for the person with the disability, then that trust has to be acknowledged as an owner. So there are a number of legal issues that need to be fed into this. The other question is how much of the restrictions that are put in this particular one are not already supported by other parts of the zoning bylaw. So for instance, parking regulations and such. We have other things that could take over, for instance, traffic and such. Then there are equity issues. So for instance, if you can do something to a single family home, why shouldn't you be able to do that to a home with an ADU? So for instance, I can put multiple front doors on my house and it's a single family home. So is that sort of a restriction that should be put on someone putting an ADU? So there are issues in terms of property rights and what we allow people to do. So then there are questions about how these things are deeded, how you handle when the house is sold. So other communities have come up with structures to understand how that all moves forward. And so that's something we would want to pull in as well. So there's the ADU in particular for this population. There are complications, I wouldn't say complications, but there are other concerns that you have to feed into so that when you create this package, it works. And so it's just, the state of California has allowed ADUs by right. There is no restriction. The town of Arlington has ADUs by right with no restriction. So there's certainly a movement towards allowing a wider use of ADUs. Whether our community is willing to go to that level is something that we don't know yet, and we need to do that research to understand. So the first step would be, as you put together something dealing with these two populations, which could certainly use additional help in housing, and certainly making sure that they can do things like apply for Section 8 or get loans to help them pay to build it. I mean, these are all things that have specific legal requirements that you have to write your ADU bylaws so that they can be accommodated. And so that's my spiel.
So thank you, Dia, for explaining the work of the ADU working group. So this came up on our work plan meeting, and, you know, I think the idea was to see if there was an appetite, and we've talked about this, you know, if the planning board and the select board with the housing partnership board wanted to put forth an article at fall town meeting, you know, to further the discussion. You know, we did some research on the state statute, the House bill that's pending, and it was kind enough to put forth an article, so, a draft article. So, you know, I think the question for this group is, and I think what I'm hearing from you is that the planning board's, you know, doesn't seem to be ready to move this specific part of the ADU discussion for fall town meeting. You'd rather have it part of a full package for ADUs in general rather than just
No, the ADU bylaw that we would be putting forward would be for these two populations, for the people with disabilities and the elderly. I'm sorry, that's not the right word. Our older residents, I apologize. So we would be proposing something just for them.
At Springtown meeting.
In the Springtown meeting.
Okay. It wouldn't be part of a broader package for general use of ADUs?
No, it would not. I mean, we had a lot of discussion about that. We had and it was really, a lot of it was based upon how other communities were able to move forward. So, for instance, I believe Wellesley passed one recently, which was much more narrow. Yep. And so there's every community is different, and so without really taking the pulse of Winchester, it's hard to understand what the appetite is. And so, I mean, that's part of what we want to do. We have, in our planning stage, we have surveys that we want to take of people to try to understand what they see as their needs, how they identify themselves in terms of whether an ADU would be possible, or how they would, you know, just an overall idea of need. I mean, we know the Council on Aging is on board. We have Philip on our board, and we had a very strong statement of support from Tom Howley, who's, I believe, the chair of the COA, at our ADU forum that we held. We're also fortunate to have, there's a newly formed housing coalition in Winchester, and they have attended our meetings, and they are really happy to work with us in terms of public outreach. So I think we have momentum, and we have a path forward, and I recognize it may not be on the same time scale, but I think ours is, I think we're moving in the good direction at the good pace. So.
So with that background, you know, this came up, like I said, at our work plan meeting, you know, potentially for the fall. So thoughts on this? You know, I've heard from various members of the community that, you know, they want this to happen. You know, really haven't discussed a timeline, but, you know, I think there is momentum, as Diab points out. So, other thoughts on this? What do people think?
I think the ADU working group is, you know, has been doing a methodical job and has people from all the different boards that are involved in this, and so I'd like to see that group that's been working for so long, and the planning board is the traditional board that brings zoning articles to town meeting. I'd like to, you know, I thought we were discussing something that I thought they were bringing this, because I've never seen a zoning bylaw article that was not brought by the planning board. So, and given all the work that they're doing, and that we are not at odds with what they're doing, right? I don't see that there's any reason for us to take a leadership position on this. I think the planning board is the right board to do that, and the ADU working group is the right process for them to do it. And I think, you know, waiting until the spring to make sure that we have a solid zoning bylaw and that can pass, and that can, you know, take into account the comments of everybody like they're doing. I think that's the right thing to do.
Others?
I'll just say that, you know, I think that it seems like we're in full agreement, as Mariano said, and as Diab said, on what is the appropriate target audience for this bylaw, this amendment. It's disabled and residents 62 years of age and above. We've been waiting a long time for this, actually, so it seems like it's coming out of nowhere, but this was part of the housing production plan that we did a lot of community outreach on. It was a priority. It was something that we indicated, and something that housing production plan is traditionally done by the planning board, but the select board took that on because we saw that that was a priority, right? It's for the town. So, and residents, town meeting members, everybody said, you need to get on this, you need to do it now. So we did that. So I see it the same way. One of the kind of reasons that we waited already a little bit to bring this forward, we were going to bring it a couple years ago, is the housing choice bill was being debated, and it was debated for a while, actually longer than we thought. But one of the pieces that was really essential to that was reducing affordable housing articles before town meeting from 2/3 to affect zoning to majority, right? So we were waiting, we discussed this on the housing partnership board, and I know, you know, Diab was even frustrated at that point that we were taking too long to address this, and everybody said, no, let's wait to go from 2/3 to majority and make sure that we get this done. So it's been on the shelf for a while. There are long backlogs of applications for our affordable housing units in Section 8, and we have very limited disability and elderly or you know, older resident you know, housing options in Winchester. So I think it's go time. It will still take a while for, once this passes, for these units to be built and put in place, but I can think of a handful, even anecdotally, of close friends they're at that point now of you know, where can my parents go? They can't afford to go into a facility. You know, I want to be near them. They want to see the kids, or other people that are disabled and want to be near their family, but want a sense of independence as they grow older. And so, I think that we agree on most of the things, and I think all of the stakeholders that I spoke with, some of them on the ADU working group, have said it's go time, let's do this. Kathy Boyle had provided me with the legislation that she worked on that I submitted to Mina, and I think people are anxious to move it forward to town meeting. And you know, I have faith in town meeting. I think that if we educate town meeting on what we're doing and what the policy objective is, I think town meeting will absolutely get behind this. I think town meeting understands that we've been talking about affordable housing for a long time, and people agree that people with disabilities and that are aging in our community need a solution, and we can provide it. It's here. It's a great policy initiative from the state to pass the housing choice bill, give us an opportunity to move it through. So I have faith that I feel like it's actually light lifting to get this done in fall town meeting. But I would say that there are certainly other things to add to it as we go down the road and expand it, right? It would be great if it was you know, much broader, and if we had something in place like California. I think that might take time, and I think that there's a lot of implications there. But for the time being, I think what has come out of the state and its legislation, our state representative Mike Day is also one of the lead sponsors on. You know, this is good. Certainly there are tweaks to be made. I know some of the feedback I had was on the size of the units. You know, I think there's some tweaks that we can make here. Parking spaces, and Diab had mentioned one that hadn't really occurred to me, that it seems silly to restrict who is living in what unit, right? Because you may be in your house, and then as you grow older, want to move to the accessory dwelling unit, and then either rent out your place or whatever. So I think that's just a small tweaks that will keep us moving in the right direction for fall town meeting.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I ask from a implementation standpoint, is there, you know, if this goes forward in November versus if it goes forward in May, what does that, does it just slow up the timeline, or if something goes forward in November, when would those zoning regulations go into effect?
Sure. So zoning bylaws have a very weird timeline, frankly. They really take effect, they still need to go to the AG for approval. However, assuming they're approved, they take effect retroactive as of the town meeting date, but they also lock in and even earlier at the first notice of the first public hearing the planning board has, which even if it is a select board, initiated article, the planning board would still have to have a hearing on it. So long story short, usually for a May town meeting, you're looking at January, December is when you all would normally, you probably have a hearing date, right?
We actually have, thanks to our member Sally Dale, we have a very detailed timeline.
Yeah, so it's a couple of months earlier.
It would be January or February is when we would, our timeline for Springtown meeting requires us to have language ready by beginning of December. And so we would have our first public hearing shortly thereafter, probably not over the end of the year, because that's another time when people don't pay attention. But, yeah.
I will say one thing that's a little bit different about this kind of bylaw, because it's permissive, not restrictive. Usually that matters a little bit more when somebody is losing a zoning right. They had a 20-yard setback, it's gonna be 15, or excuse me, 25. This one, because it's permissive, folks are less likely to apply in January because they will want to see where it goes with town meeting. So you do lose some time that way, but there is that kind of backwards effect.
Thank you.
Yeah, this would, it would delay things by 6 months. And we do have members on the ADU working group who would like to build one for their own use, but they have, at our meeting on Friday, I think we had pretty much everyone there. We all went back to deciding that this was the timeline that we thought was doable. So,
Okay. Anyone else? All right. So with that, thank you, Dio,
thank you very much.
for your input.
Yeah, could you also, if you had, sorry, Rich, some of those recommendations, if you could circulate those to us too from the ADU working group on the, I know Brian had mentioned, and you had mentioned that you guys had some recommendations on.
Oh, the markup on the language?
Yeah, the markup.
Yeah, I've got something that's heavily edited.
Okay.
But without the discussion behind it, it's not really useful to you.
Okay,
So-
okay, fair enough.
So
Thank
we'll
you.
put something together and send it through to you, because there are particular reasons why we said this doesn't work.
Right, right.
So,
That would be good to hear. Thank you.
thanks.
Thanks, Dio. So with that in mind, do we want to continue? I think this is something that would need to be, if this board brought this forward, I think it would need to be a joint effort. I don't see it working any other way. And, clearly the planning board has, a detailed timeline ready to go. So, does anyone feel differently? What's,
I think one of us could join the ADU working group if they would have a member from this board. But I think, given that, the planning board is responsible for
right.
zoning bylaws, the planning board has to have the hearing, right? It's clearly their responsibility.
Mhm.
I don't think we should move forward. I think we should send a representative to the ADU working group and work with them.
Diep, could we have a representative on the ADU working group?
Yes, by all means.
Okay.
We would walk to a
Come on back up.
Yes.
Since there's an interest there's some interest, and we've heard from the public about this as well, so I think.
We would love to have someone. We meet every 2 weeks, Fridays at 10 p.m. 10 a.m., 10 a.m. Oh my God, no.
That'd be really tough.
That's the other ADU working
That's
group.
the other idea. Yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have let that slip.
Does anyone
Party
want
is at 10 p.m., the working is at 10 a.m. So yeah, we will send email to Brian Sekeli, and he will put you on the ADU working group mailing list, and then we will, you
Okay.
can come.
Does anyone want to join the ADU working group? I can't do it with my schedule, but I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I think it's, you know, the things aren't mutually exclusive, right? I think joining the ADU working group, and there's a lot of work to be done, and then, you know, also moving forward with the article, which I think is, you know, necessary at this point. I would hope that the planning board would support it. I know the Housing Partnership Board is supportive, Council on Aging is supportive. I think if all the relevant stakeholders get on board, I think we can get something in place as soon as possible. And sending out in advance, you know, as Rich, you had mentioned earlier, a notification to town meeting, some of the kind of bigger things that we have, you know, on our plate. We'll start those conversations. And I think people actually, they focus on things over a more intensive, shorter period of time than over a longer period of time. So I think the education piece is certainly necessary, but I think that we can kind of truncate that time a little bit and be successful.
Yeah, I would agree with the people focus on the shorter.
Yeah.
That's been my experience, but who knows? Okay. Well, thank you, Dieb.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll table that for now. Next up was the CPA. And this was also came up at our working group session. So I think Mina's here to just walk us through how that process works and, you know, the timeline on that.
Sure, and I just want to make sure, because I wasn't at the working group, obviously. Is everybody familiar with what the CPA would do, what kinds of things it would fund? You've had that discussion.
Actually, I think we are, but I think, you know, just for residents and people,
Sure.
because we've only maybe discussed it.
Or we think we know what it is, but, you know, so I.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's right, that's true.
And I live in a community that has it and represent others that do, so it's been interesting to watch from both angles, actually. So the Community Preservation Act, in very short, description, it basically is a set aside of funding for particular uses, and the idea is there are uses that don't necessarily get the attention otherwise. The particular uses are essentially open space, acquisition. There's a couple of verbs you'll hear over and over: acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space. So earlier, the question about Davidson Park, I think it's called, right, is that would be part of that would be open space, right, keeping the river. Acquisition, preservation, and rehab and restoration of historic resources. So that's structures. It's also been used for very creative things, ranging from artifacts to paintings in a town hall to a whole bunch of things. Restoration and all of I won't go through the verbs each time, but all of those things, and restoration of land for recreational use. So that includes parks, public parks, recreational features in natural spaces. It includes almost everything except turf fields, so you still have to use ARPA for that. That's actually an express carve-out.
Yep.
Preservation and creation of community housing. That is an increasingly important one for a lot of communities, obviously. And community housing essentially is affordable housing. It's a slightly different definition, but it's actually broader. And the rehab or restoration of open space and community housing has to be for properties acquired by it. So you can only do certain things for some categories and not others. But that's the upshot. The last one that's maybe of interest for you guys in particular is there's a little add-on at the very end of Section 5 of the CPA that a city or town may appropriate money in any year from the CPA to an affordable housing trust fund. It can just go straight to the affordable housing trust. The reason that's important is otherwise CPA funding is very project-based. Town department applies for renovation of a particular park, et cetera. One important thing is it can also be used for privately owned projects as long as there's a restriction put on it. So the town can help fund projects that might not otherwise get funding and work with community partners. How the funding happens is through a surcharge essentially on your property tax bills. That can be different percentages, and the way that the process goes, this is where I'll segue to that, is that first the town meeting has to approve of it. it approves of both the acceptance of having the Community Preservation Act in the first place. It also has to approve the amount of the surcharge. It can't be less than 1%, and it can't be higher than 3. And some communities that started at 1 have actually raised it because they've used it so much. Once town meeting passes it, it's not automatic. It then goes to a townwide vote, a townwide referendum at the next available municipal or state election. So if you were to do it this fall, you would vote on it next March. And then it goes into effect unless some towns will dictate that it goes into effect a couple of years down the road, but automatically otherwise it would go the next fiscal year. So it won't be retroactive in the year that you're in. And that's sort of the basic process for it. Then once it's launched, you have to form a community preservation committee. One of the things that's just, important, actually, the working group that was just mentioned is an interesting, sort of homemade example of something like this. But one of the things about CPCs is they are, by statute, designed to be drawing from existing boards and committees that might have those different interests. So you might have a member of the Affordable Housing Trust, you might have a member of the Conservation Commission, the HDC, the Historical Commission, et cetera. And so you get a variety of those interests. I can go into many more details, but the funding has a sort of balance to it. You can't spend it all on one category. You have to kind of allocate, I think it's at least 10% in each. There's also an administrative bucket, so things like legal fees, recording fees for acquired properties, inspections, brokers, whatever you kind of need for getting these kind of projects done can fall into those buckets. And with the big thing I actually did not mention so far, and this is sort of the reason many towns do it, is not only are you putting aside some percentage of your tax dollars, you're getting a state match. The state match has differed from year to year depending on the funding level at the State House. In some ways, it's not as robust of a match as it was when the CPA started. The flip side of that is about 3 or 4 years ago, the city of Boston joined. And while they are a big taker for the match, they also are a huge voting bloc in the State House for funding for the CPA. So whereas before it was almost all suburban communities and smaller cities like Cambridge that were CPA communities, now there's a kind of a political force behind the CPA that I think those who are very involved, which is a group called the Community Preservation Coalition, was very excited to see that because it expanded the scope of sort of advocacy for it. So.
What is it? Is it? I've heard the match is around 18%. Is that?
I believe that's the current. It really goes up and down depending on the budget cycles, but it's about 18% right now.
1 to 3% of the tax levy. Is that what it is?
It's that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What happens if the tax levy? So it increases by 2.5% each year, but what happens if there's an operating override? Does the percentage stay the same, or is it an amount that gets approved by the vote?
It is a percentage that just stays the same. So, and if you want to change the percentage again, you have to go through a similar process.
You have to go through a vote.
Yeah.
So if you want to go from 1% to 3%, you have to go
exactly.
through a townwide vote again.
Yeah.
Is it a townwide or a town meeting vote that you have to change the percentage?
Let me double check on the
Yeah.
on the acceptance, but I've seen it, so to be quite honest,
You
I've
can
seen
get
it
back
done
to us
both
later.
ways.
It's not a
Yeah,
big deal.
because I
Yeah.
think one of the things that some towns have said, even if they could have just done it by town meeting, I know every town
Right.
has done it, so let me just double check that as we're talking.
Okay, and but so if there is an operating override, then the amount increases automatically because the total tax levy increases.
That's correct.
Okay.
There are, towns can vote at the outset, though, I will just note, to include all of the exemptions, or most of the exemptions, that apply to property taxes to the CPA as well, because it's not automatic. It shows up separately on a tax bill.
And then is the CPA committee responsible or the only party that can allocate funds out of
Sure.
the account, or is it the select board's responsibility?
Yeah, no, it's sort of a joint responsibility. It's ultimately town meeting, but the rules, where the CPC comes in is they take in, the way most towns have set it up, they'll take in the applications, several months before town meeting, before the annual town meeting. No project can get voted on unless it's been recommended by the CPC, excuse me, and the maximum amount is set by the CPC. It can be reduced, but it can't be increased. So if they say $100,000 for this park, town meeting can vote up to that amount. But they really have that initial judgment. Usually what will happen is the CPC will get in applications from both town entities and private entities. They'll kind of review them for completeness. They might have town council just review any eligibility questions that are coming up, if there's sort of any close calls on whether it's eligible or not. And then they'll make their recommendations based on their available budget and forecasted revenues and the forecasted state match, and go from there.
What's the composition of that committee?
It's, the exact composition, I don't have off the top of my head, but it's usually members from, think of those 5 different buckets I just mentioned. Yeah. It's really representatives from the relevant town boards and committees that have the say in that. So, in both Lexington and Concord, for instance, the affordable housing is been represented historically by their town partner nonprofit. So, equivalent of the Housing Partnership Board or the Affordable Housing Trust, since you have one now. The HDC, I think, has a permanent member by statute, usually if there is one, and the Historical Commission. Typically, there's a member from the Conservation Commission. Usually, there's a representative from the Select Board that is kind of serves as a liaison, but a little bit more active than your typical liaison, just because it has so much coordination with town meeting. The other thing is projects don't have to only be CPA funded. It's another funding source. So if you have a larger project, again, I'll use Washington Swanton as an example. If you were doing that acquisition, you would be able to take some CPA funds for community housing and combine them with the other sources. You can also borrow essentially CPA-backed bonds, which can go through the same mechanisms.
The initial vote at town meeting would be a 2/3 vote?
The initial vote?
Yeah.
The initial vote, I believe, is just a majority vote, but I will let me confirm that too. Yeah, it's just majority, yeah.
So my understanding is maybe many years ago, several years ago, there was some interest in this.
It went to town meeting.
It went to town meeting, and did not pass at that point.
It's close. Rich is here too, right? When was that, 10 years ago or so, or 15 years? 2007?
The acquisition of Hamilton Farm.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We actually had a citizens group that was looking into that as a mechanism, maybe of funding, using CPA to fund the purchase of Hamilton Farm. So it was decided by the select board at that time that it was just too risky a path to take.
Yeah.
Because of the timing of the elements.
For Right Lock Farm, yeah, when some people know it, but yeah, and I think it was only 60 votes or something. 60. I mean, no, Maryland looked it up. It was only just missed. So you look at all that matching funds, that we've lost over that period of time, and you don't want to really look at it because it's a lot. And we just add how much we've invested in these kinds of things, just straight from the tax levy over the years without that. So.
I mean, I know that it looks like an override, right? So it's like nobody wants to bring it, but the reality is town meeting has full control over appropriation. It's going to be appropriated for things that otherwise we would have to appropriate anyway, whether it's a debt exclusion or whether it's from operating or capital or whatever, right? And at least we get 18% match. It's better than 0, which is what we get without CPA, right? So to me, it's a no-brainer. But I know that it's a political issue because it appears like an override, even though it's really saving us money by making this investment from having to put it on capital or on operating.
Mina, for the historic resources,
Mm-hmm.
like, could it involve interior renovations of town hall?
By chance, like a new HVAC system. Let's get a little bit more specific.
You might not want to lead with that, but
it's historic.
But I mean, that kind of question, like, is it just like an exterior facade renovation?
That's a good
on historic structure, or does it include interior work as well?
It includes certain interior. There's a lot of So if it's a public project or on public property, it's usually easier to find that it fits within the eligibility criteria. Capital improvements to a historic structure to make it usable for its intended use is paraphrasing the language essentially, or to make them ADA accessible are typically allowed. So often you will see HVAC retrofits are actually a fairly popular one, because sometimes to do that right in a historic structure is expensive and requires special expertise. So that's a good example. The only reason I'm pausing at all, and today the Supreme Court may have changed this a little bit, but the interior work gets trickier when it's a private entity, because it can be harder to justify the sort of public nature of the preservation. And so, for instance, a lot of older buildings in New England are churches. And so there's always been questions about whether or not a steeple may be something that's appropriate because it's facing the common and has been there since the Revolution, et cetera, et cetera. Interior stained glass is probably not okay because it sort of starts mixing religious use. And that's true for non-religious uses too. There's sort of people get a little bit more hesitant to do that. So, okay. Just to answer the question, the adoption process is what you have to follow for an increase as well.
So the question for this board is this something, we want to roll up our sleeves and try to put forward, for a fall town meeting? Or spring town meeting, or not do it at all, or?
Seems like we can get it going for fall. I mean, it's, I know it seems like doing a lot, but, you do need to kind of set it up in a way where you're going out to the townwide, vote after that, right? So the spring would be the next time, and then we would have to wait another year technically, right?
More or less. You would wait till the next state or town election, so, because next year's an odd year, yeah. Yeah, if you were to do it last spring, you could vote this fall, but that's.
Yeah, so, it seems like, and this is included as one of the recommendations of the housing production plan too, and it's particularly for that piece where you create the affordable housing trust, but you need some way to fund it, right? We've had, because we're running out of money. It's great, we're using the money, but a lot of that came from linkage payments and other things. There's no dedicated source of revenue for the affordable housing trust to apply to our affordable housing work. So.
Anyone?
So I think the one risk is timing. It is a pretty quick turnaround to communicate and get people on board with something that, as Mariano said, is effectively an override, and those tend to be less palatable in a sense. I do think with the previous discussion we had on ARPA funds and, seeing that there are really high priorities around these types of things with the open space and restoration and community housing, I think there's there's a lot of need, and we can show that we've been making a commitment with ARPA, but I just worry that if we are trying to rush to do something in the fall, that it's not going to have a lot of time to build consensus and get it passed, and then would it set us back 10 more years to bring it up again?
Fair point.
My concern is there's gonna be a debt exclusion on the ballot in March for Lynch, right? And so having two of them, a lot of times one of them fails.
Well, debt exclusion for Lynch will be in January.
Oh, that would be in January?
Yeah.
It'll be January.
Would
I would assume, so let me ask this question, Nina.
I know where you're going, so go ahead.
So if it passes in November fall town meeting, does it go to the January? Because that's next, is that next municipal election, or does it go to March?
So I'm just reading the language to make sure whether it's the next regularly scheduled municipal election.
Does
So
it
we'll go to
have to
March.
be the next one, or could you get town meeting approval and then wait a year?
It's a good question. The way the statute's written, it's supposed to be the next one. I don't know if any town has ever tried to make its vote contingent on waiting a year. I don't think they can do that because that's in the statute. But the effective date.
Yeah, you wait for implementation.
Yeah, I would hate to have it fail and then we have to wait another 5 years to build consensus.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, when you look at, sorry, Rich, you know, you're looking at, you know, majority vote at town meeting, right?
Yeah,
And
that's-
that is the, you know, the shorter timeline for us. And then we've got, you know, all the way to the spring essentially in order to kind of, you know, make the case and make it a conversation around the spring elections really. At a time when we're also not gonna have it, you know, we don't think we're gonna have an operating override, you know, on the ballot then, right? So it's kind of the free, you know, there's never a good time to ask residents to tax themselves, right? I mean, that's what it is. And, I think last time there wasn't really much support, but, or much, there certainly was a lot of support, but not a big campaign around it. And it, I think, passed at town meeting very well, and then just barely came up short without much effort at all, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at, it's like every day there's a new expense that's coming down the road, new capital project that comes up, and the costs are just astronomical. And the fact that, you know, we can get, you know, an 18-20% match, you know, is a no-brainer, I agree. So I mean, personally, I like to see us act sooner rather than later. However, I am cognizant of, you know, that we don't want this to fail. I mean, I think one thing we could do is we could start pursuing it and see, you know, where we go in the next several weeks. And if it seems like it's rushed and there's, you know, a big backlash, then we can, you know, go to spring. I mean, I think the town meeting warrant for this fall closes September 26th, I believe. So we've got.
See what town meeting has to say, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's also many times a good barometer of, you know, whether they
Yep.
think they've been taken by surprise or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just been definitely some projects, you know, some high-profile projects that, you know, this could have benefited, you know, certainly, you know, funding rather than just taxpayers. So, you know, out of the, you know, or general fund. So.
And there's
right,
also, you know, a organization that helps support these efforts as well, right? So I forget exactly what it's called, but it's
The Community Preservation Coalition.
Coalition, there you go. So
Unfortunately, same acronym as CPC, which makes life hard. but
right, that's why I was kind of stumbling over it. I thought I knew it at one point, but yeah. So that maybe it makes sense for us to reach out there more formally and see, kick the tires and see if they say no, you're going way too fast, pump the brakes, or.
All right, well, is there someone or two people on the board that want to, well, if there's a consensus among the board to kind of kick the tires on this further and keep going with it, is there one or two people on the board that want to kind of spearhead that effort?
Yeah, I think last time Anthea and I had.
Oh, great.
Had said that.
Missed that part.
I think that's in the work plan, I think, yeah, so.
Sure, you're hired.
I think that was.
Does anyone care about that? Nope, great.
Before the special town meeting and all our brains were in other directions.
Okay. So yeah, that'd be great. So keep us updated. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mina.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mina.
Good night.
I think that concludes, so just starting around fall town meeting, if you think of anything, you know, we can certainly put it on for the next agenda. July 18th is our next regular scheduled meeting, so happy to, you know, consider stuff.
Trees.
Yep, I saw that. We have the leaf blower people coming in, I think, in July. So the trees, I don't know, are they playing in the fall, or are they, you know?
I think it's for the fall, yeah.
Okay. Get them in. All right. Next up, town council search, selection. So we have conducted our interviews. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the public. Some letters that I think everyone saw in their package. I think everyone got all those letters that came in. I've certainly been receiving phone calls and you know, about this issue. So I just want to see where we're at after our interviews the other day. You know, I've spent some time with all these documents. I personally reached out to, made some phone calls to different people that I know in the municipal law world, people that I work with, and some of the stuff I do. just to get their opinions. And, I think I'm prepared to have a discussion tonight about this topic, so I don't know what everyone else.
So what names did you hear come up most often as most competent on a range of subjects for firms,
Generally,
generally?
the two names I came up with that I heard most were Mead Tallerman and Karis North. I was told that Jay Tallerman, Kate Federoff, and Karis North are regularly on the MMLA listserv. They are typically, when you're planning some type of municipal conference, they're the first people you seek to invite on a legal issue across the board. And I would consider them, based on the feedback that I got, they would be the generalists. That's typically the feedback I received. Some people knew of Donna Brewer, but didn't know her enough to comment. But it was really those two names, Jay Tallerman and Karis North, were the two that I was given by the people I talked to. I talked to about 5 people, so. For what it's worth, that's what I was given. I don't know how you want to have this discussion, if you want to go through each firm, if you want to just see where we're at with everyone. How do you want to do this?
Is there any way we can start by narrowing things down before discussing? Are there people who, are the
Yep.
firms who sort of fell out of the ranking for folks, so we don't have to?
Sure. Just, anyone
So
want to
I'd
start
say
that?
KP Law's out for me. Just, I've had some experiences with them, and some are good, and some are just, they could be better.
Yeah, I mean, I'd share that as well. I think, Mark Grabowski, great attorney, their firm is very well respected in land use. But from my personal experiences with KP Law and just that of talking to people, I think it just depends on, like you said. So I would be inclined to eliminate them as well. I just don't think they would be the best fit for this town. I don't think having the two firms, that concerns me a little bit. So I would be inclined to eliminate them as well. Sure, what others think.
Yeah, I agree.
Just thought it was weird, too, the way they came in and introduced that whole, I'm like, well, do you refer business to each other? You practice together? What's going on there? Right? So, it was opaque. And
I think it's a small, kind of legal world inside the municipal law world, right? And,
It is.
it's,
Very small.
we need definitely experts in municipal law, and more than anything, we need experts in land use, right? So I think that they were trying to meet the need, even though it did seem a little cumbersome.
Yeah.
My concern more with them is that they've already got their hands on the private side a little bit too much, and
Yep.
so that's but certainly Mark Bobrowski's done a lot of great work for us. Jonathan Silverstein was with KP Law last time as a finalist, so they're certainly at a very high level. And Lauren Goldberg is, probably one of the best municipal attorneys in the state by far. So, but
Yep.
I don't think the fit is there for us.
I agree. I mean, I think we should say at the outset that, these, when you submit an RFP like this, or you have a search process such as this, these are the firms, these are the players, right? I mean, there's a handful of other firms out there that, sporadically represent other towns, but these are the major players in the municipal legal world. So, and I think the last time, and you guys may remember, the last time you did this, I think 3 of these were probably finalists as well. So, when you chose Anderson Krieger.
And we've reduced the number already from what the initial application pool was, right? So we've already.
Yep. Yeah, we had 7 to begin with.
Yeah.
Now we're down to 4. Anyone else? So, the hour's growing late, so I'll spearhead the conversation, I guess. So to me, I had a top three. And it was Mead, Tallerman, Murphy and Hess, Toomey and Lehane, and then Myers and Harrington. And I went back and forth for the last, 5 days or so on those three. After the interviews on Thursday and on, spending some time on this on Friday, I tended to dismiss Anderson Krieger. And I know we've gotten a lot of support of letters for Mina. I think Mina's a wonderful person. He's been a great asset to this town. He's responsive. He's a good lawyer, and he's done a good job. However, I think what attracted Anderson Krieger to this town was Art Krieger and his land use abilities. And I think that's how, this town came to learn of Anderson Krieger. And I think Art has now retired. And my concern, just, sitting in this seat for a couple of years, well, not a couple of years, but about 15 months now, and seeing, and probably the most complaints I hear about are on land use issues in this town, and the advice or non-advice being given out. And I think it's a complex town. I mean, property prices are high. We have complex land use issues. We have, people that have the resources to be litigious. And, our ZBA process to a layman is extremely cumbersome and confusing. And so, I think, I think we need, top-tier land use attorneys to help guide us. And my concern with the Anderson Krieger proposal and, and the interview process was I didn't see that void being filled of Art Krieger leaving. Austin, and I went through their resumes, and I mean, I think, Mina's saying he's gonna step in and be the land use attorney, he'll handle everything, but I didn't, I'm not sure if that is in the best interest of the town, and I'm not sure if, looking at Austin's resume, I mean, he's a white-collar defense attorney, has done some litigation. Stephanie is a transactional attorney. So I was hoping that based on, what has happened in the last year or so, and seeing us go through this process, that, Anderson Krieger would come in and they would, give us a plan on how they're gonna fill that void, how, they might make some changes to better the relationship from a cost-effective standpoint, but really from a land use perspective. And I just didn't hear that. So for me, I thought these other three firms, after hearing them, what I know of them, reading their RFPs, and really talking to other players in the municipal law community, I thought that we might be better served from one of these three firms. So I eliminated Anderson Krieger personally when I eliminated KP Law, and I was left with these three firms to kind of do some more homework and dig around for the last couple of days. I then narrowed it to two, and I kind of have a 1A and 1B, and I don't think, I think one might be slightly better than the other, but I think they're both exceptional law firms. I should say, all these firms are great firms, but for what I see and what I think the town direction needs to go in, and for the best interest of town, I landed on Mead, Tallerman, and Costa as my choice, and that's based on also understanding that Jay Tallerman represented the town in the Manchester Lights decision, or litigation, I should say, and that he had, everyone that worked with him spoke highly of him, thought he did a good job on that, and found him to be good to work with. So, that's where I landed on this at this point. I think he brings the experience we need. From a land use standpoint, I think his partners are, also highly regarded. Former Mayor Mead is highly regarded attorney. She couldn't be here that night, but someone we could rely on as well. And I just think they bring us the total package that we need from a land use standpoint, from a general municipal law standpoint. I think they'll be responsive and will, immerse themselves in understanding Winchester and, how we operate. And I think, people will come to get the same comfort level with that firm as they do with Anderson Krieger, but I think we'll be better served from a land use perspective with that firm. So I know I've gone on for a couple minutes now, but that's kind of where I ended up in my process.
So I also narrowed it down to two. After reviewing everything in the interviews, the two I narrowed it down to, number one, I had Anderson and Krieger, and number two, I had Maris and Harrington. And I thought, the other three are great firms that I'm sure do great work, but they're not a good fit for Winchester. And after reviewing all of the feedback, and I had Anderson and Krieger first, but after reviewing all the feedback that we got from all the different boards, committees, people who have worked with A&K, the planning board working with MENA on land issues, I think, I don't think it's a time to change. I think A&K has done a fantastic job for the town. I understand that we have concerns about costs. I don't think that will be addressed by anybody else. The issue with costs is we have people who can afford to be litigious, right? And we have to defend the decisions that that our boards, especially the CBA reaches. And I think there are good ideas that A&K had on how we can try to control those costs a little bit. And but I think we should stay with A&K and all the feedback that we got from everybody that works with town council in town agreed with that. And I think it's our decision, but I think it's important that we listen to the other boards and committees and what their opinion is. And so, granted, A&K was already my number one, so it's easy for me to say that when everybody's feedback agrees with who my number one was, but I think that also carries some weight. So that would be my vote.
Okay. Others? Talk at once.
What I found when we talked about land use, and we did have feedback from the planning board who works with Anderson Krieger on land use, and was complimentary in the work that they've done. It kind of absent any other feedback in that area that was coming in to the select board over the past few days. Seems to kind of solidify that it would make sense to stay with Anderson Krieger. I think we have, obviously, all of these firms, are well respected in municipal law, and they know what's going on in towns like Winchester, and could, easily get their footing. But also just having, some of the longstanding things that we've been doing, or like Waterfield and Washington and Swanton and some other areas. It could be areas where the intricacies are sort of taking longer to get up to speed, and when things are moving, pretty quickly quickly in a sense, obviously, not immediately, but when things are moving pretty quickly, as we look at Washington and Swanton RFP and things like that, it seems potentially risky to take out legal counsel at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, I think there will be some matters, that, just makes sense for Anderson Krieger to continue to, if we were to move away from them, they would continue to handle, just because they're further along, some of the litigation, stuff like that. And I think, the comments, at least my perspective of all the comments we received about A&K, and there were several from boards that, were in support of A&K, and understandably. I mean, I don't think anyone said anything that, we don't all experience with, MENA or A&K. It's a comfort level, it's a responsiveness, and it's, a willingness to work with the board, and be forward thinking. I'm just concerned, I mean, I think we would get, and I hope that with another firm, we would get to that point as well, with a comfort level, someone who we thought, would be embedded in the town, be a member of the community, someone, we respect, responsive, and I think we could get there. Again, I'm just concerned that, with the experience, and just looking at, basically I'm comparing the attorneys that would be responsible, for overseeing our operations and our point person, and then the people that would be involved as backups versus the A&K proposal. And I just don't see the same level of experience at the municipal law level or land use level. And that's kind of where I fall. And I think, like I said, I think they're all exceptional lawyers, and I think, their specialties, we all, being in the industry, we all have our specialties, and they're all stuff we kind of, think we can do, but, we kind of, do that. But I think your points are well taken, both of you. It's just where I landed. Anyone else? There you go, you guys.
I crossed Mars Harrington off my list because they have 13 lawyers. They say they do every single thing in-house. I looked at some of the experience, and I thought that was an interesting comment. So I just didn't feel like that was what we're after. So I DQ'd them. And then, with A&K, statutorily, we don't have to go to RFP. So you go to RFP because, you want to see what else is out there, I guess. And so they would be the third out of my other two choices, frankly.
What was your first choice?
I'd say Jay Tellerman, B. Tellerman.
The issue that I had with Tellerman is that, they don't have enough people. Like, they have too many towns and not enough partners, right? So that's what I like about Mears and Harrington, if we're gonna talk about somebody other than A&K.
Yep.
Is that, 13 lawyers, 13 towns, right?
Yep.
Whereas with Tellerman, it's like 6 lawyers.
Yep. So
15 towns, something like that.
So for me personally, I can speak to Maris Harrington. The concern I had was, and if you remember, I asked the question, I said, how long have you been with the firm? I think the person that they designated as their land use attorney for us, had been with the firm for 30 years. Now granted, he did a 2-year clerkship at the land court, which, and he's, I think he may be the point person for the town of Milton, but, I mean, that was just a little concerning to me when, when I'm thinking about a litigation standpoint. We have a land use litigation case, and that was, someone with that little experience running point on like a land use litigation case for me is just a little concerning. I mean, maybe like at a firm as a second chair or something like that, but that was just a little concerning to me. But
I understand, they were my number 2, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no.
So, yeah.
And on the A&K side, another thing about litigation was, it was, I think Austin would have taken on more of a role with 5 years of experience. I mean, that's, in the civil world, that's not a ton of trial experience. So that was just putting together that litigation part of it, for me.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I had, my rankings were me, Tellerman, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey Lane, and then Myers and Harrington. You know, obviously, I've enjoyed working with Mina. I think he's, you know, an excellent attorney. He's been excellent for us. To Rich's point, there's definitely a void there with Art retiring that I don't think is filled by anyone else there, really. I mean, and that was one of the primary reasons that we went with Anderson Krieger a few years ago. So, you know, I think land use is a big one for us, my experience with Jason Tallerman on the project there where Anderson Krieger had conflicted out, you know, it's been excellent, and certainly their reputation, I think, is, I've been getting a lot of phone calls about people suggesting them as well to me, independent of this process. I've heard a lot about them, and you know, I think, you know, Mead Tallerman is probably the top choice for me, and a close second with Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, so and Lane. So that would be it.
Okay. So obviously there's a little bit of split here. I'm sorry, Anthea, who is your number two?
I didn't state.
So. Maybe that's why I didn't know.
For me, Mead Tallerman was the second with the background with land use as well as affordable housing and 40Bs.
And Mariano, Mead Tallerman was your third choice, or you didn't have them? Fourth, okay.
I just think they don't have enough, you know, we're
Yep.
not gonna get enough attention. And I didn't like their answers to the question on only 3 meetings a month, right? I mean, we have way more than those meetings per month here.
Yeah, well, they had, you know, in their fee, well, that was their flat fee proposal, right? So, I mean, they also billed by the hour. I mean, it looks like two firms billed by the hour, $250 versus, you know, what we pay now, $350. And one was at $230 an hour as well. So, you know, there's certainly the hourly option. I mean, they had all those different fee break, you know, flat fee, blended rate to.
Yeah, I saw that. But I just thought we wouldn't get, they're not a good fit for, just from a number of attorneys.
Well, I'm not sure we're gonna find, you know, complete consensus on this. You know, and I think, you know, part of the reason there is because I think, you know, like we said, these are, you know, when you send out an RFP like this, these are the players that are gonna apply. They're the major players in the industry, and, you know, they typically are competing against themselves, and sometimes, you know, as they said in their interviews, sometimes they're replacing different people, or, you know, working with different people, or, you know, when somebody's conflicted out, they step in. So they all seem, I mean, I don't know who said it, but the municipal law bar is quite small and a tight-knit community, so. So, you know, I don't know if, you know, I don't think, I mean, personally, I feel like I've got enough information to make a decision. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks, but I think, you know, I don't see us, I don't think we need to re-interview anybody. I don't know if anything would change if we, you know, went through this process further. So, I mean, I think I'm prepared to make a decision tonight. I feel comfortable where I've landed. I've spent a lot of time on this over the last couple weeks. You know, I've read these, you know, at least probably going on 4 times on some of these, so, and just talking to people, and just based on my personal experience, you know, the work that I do. So I don't know if there's a motion to be made, or if.
Yeah, I can make a motion. I move that we appoint Mead Tallerman Costa LLC to town council.
Will we be appointing, or would it be we would negotiate?
Or I guess to, start a negotiation process with them, and then I guess we would appoint at a later date.
I'll second that.
Okay. So I guess we can do a roll call vote. Mariano?
No.
Anthea?
No.
John?
Yes.
Mike?
Yep.
And I'll vote yes. So we should begin that process. Do we want to designate a backup at this point, or do we want to see where those negotiations go and then go from there?
Yeah, I kind of toyed with that idea because it was really so close for me with Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, that somebody certainly that I think that we would benefit if there was a conflict or something with Mead Tallerman, that we kind of already have them in queue to reach out, just like we really did when Anderson Krieger had a conflict and Mead Tallerman jumped in for us. So I don't know if anybody would be interested in that.
When does our appointment of A&K end?
So right now, they're extended through July 30th. So we would have to negotiate something with me and Tallerman, and then, obviously there's a transition period, and, we'd have to figure out what cases, we'd want them to stay on, what issues we want them to stay on, and then, then go from there. So it's not like we just cut ties. I think there's, it's a process.
No,
that
I
we
just
need to-
thought maybe if it was July 1st, we needed to extend them anyway since.
Yeah, no, they're extended to July, we did that the last meeting, we extended them to July 30th. So do we want to, discuss a backup, or do we want to just see where the conversation with Tallerman go?
I think it makes us, if we can't negotiate, we come back and make another decision. I don't think we need to
Okay,
telegraph a backup.
that's fine, I just wanted to ask.
In terms of negotiations, I heard, concerns from Mariano about their responsiveness and sort of the size and us being able to reach them. I don't know if that includes approaches for outreach to their references and getting a feel from other
Yep,
towns.
no, absolutely, I think there's a process, that's a good point. So I think there's a process that needs to play out, just, I think we need to check references, we need to, determine, a fee schedule. I mean, I guess we could discuss that now. Is it preference that we have a flat fee? I mean, we should probably discuss that at another point, right?
Yeah, we should
See what they
discuss it
got.
in executive session.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, it's late, it's 11:10.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I think, I guess through the town manager's office, we can get the ball rolling on this and then go from there.
Yeah, I'm happy to be part of the fee negotiation.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe we can all just Zoom on a morning, quick one issue Zoom, when we have some.
Call an executive session.
No, absolutely, that's what I mean.
Oh, I thought you meant tomorrow morning.
No, we call it executive session, and we can just Zoom about it.
And we can set some parameters of what we're looking for,
Yeah.
whether it's fee,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. Okay.
So, Rich, you'll just revisit the scope of services, just to make sure that whatever we negotiate, I know it was an RFP, but is that our best, is that exactly what we want?
Yeah, I think we're looking for, continuity, a single, firm to handle our town council needs, across all the boards in town meeting, and.
It's about setting expectations.
Yep.
With the ZBA or the planning board, and to Mariano's point, if you're gonna tell us you're gonna be available, then it doesn't make a difference, you have to be available.
Mhm.
And if they can't do it, that's fine, because there's other good firms.
Right.
I think we need to be clear on that. They said they were clear on that, but really, were they? So let's have a discussion about what that expectation is. Not that, it's not unreasonable, it's just,
Do you want to join me in the negotiations?
sure. No,
Is that okay, or do you want to?
I mean, you know, you guys are your business more. I just want to make sure that we're going into this with, you know, I know we're going into this feeling good about it, but I want to make sure in 6 months, they're not all sad and giving us not what we expected.
Right.
And the town pays the price. And the way we do that is by understanding each other up front.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I mean, I think everyone's raising good issues, and maybe the next.
I'm not trying to make more work. I just
No,
think
that's the next logical step in the
part of the
process.
next
Yeah,
step.
yeah,
Right.
exactly, the next step. So you seem to have a good handle on the next step, so if you guys want to take the lead on this, that's fine. And then we can.
I frankly don't have the experience level, so that's,
Okay.
I'm not trying to give someone else work to do, but if I could,
And
if
I
I
can
was
do it.
capable of it,
I
yeah.
think too, Rich, you know, even, you know, Beth and Mark can kind of, you know, initially kind of,
Right, that's what
you
I was
know,
saying.
reach out and connect, and then we can get, because, you know, part of it is, you know, all of our expectations are different. I mean, I think that the constant, you know, contact is one of the problems, right? I mean, I don't think if you're a municipal lawyer, you know, you're not an emergency room doctor, you don't need to be, you know, waking up at 3 a.m. and get a phone call from one of us about an, you know, open meeting law question, right? Like, I think we've got it, you know, that's where some of the cost has come in, right? It's a high level of service, I think, but it's, you know, maybe not the most effective for what we need. So, and one of the things I liked about Mead Tallerman too was and a couple of the applicants had mentioned having, you know, every other week office hours or something like that. I think that would really benefit a lot of the other boards, you know, would know that that's there and have, you know, a time where they could go in and sign up and have a conversation and
Yep.
have access.
And I think we need to work on, you know, a group, like, get together the different boards and understand what the usage of town council is, right? And just so that we can figure out how to be more efficient. Like, you know, how much time did Mina spend on this ADU thing when there's already an ADU group working on it, right? How much did we get billed for that? And we already have a working group working on that. That is, so, you know, those kinds of things that are, that run up our legal bills. I think if we work together more with other boards, if we could cut those things out.
Well, I think other boards need to work with us as well, right? So we created the housing. One second. We created the housing production plan, the ADU working group. We've been talking about as a priority as select board for a long time, right? So, and we've been talking about it in the housing partnership board. So one of the members of the ADU working group was the one that supplied me with that information to go to Mina, which, you know, came from Rep Day. It was state level legislation, right? So, you know, I don't think Mina spent a whole lot of time on it, but it's the product that we need to put forward and we need to be communicating. So after all this is done, then inviting the select board to an ADU working group seems a little bit silly to me. So that's not a town council problem. That is a, you know, a silo problem that we need organizationally to deal with. So, and that ends up creating a lot of, you know, legal fees more than anything. So,
Okay,
you know,
so if it's okay with everyone, maybe Mariano and I can work on the next steps of this. I think we have a good sense of what the next steps are, and I appreciate everyone's comments. All right. We're gonna keep going because it's almost summer. And I don't think this conversation will be maybe, hopefully not, as involved as the agenda indicates. But town manager, Beth and I had discussed this. She's going to excuse herself from this part of the meeting. That's why it's on for last. So thanks, Beth, for all your help tonight.
Thanks, Beth.
Good night. Do we have to lock up now? Okay. So the town manager search process. So I think, you know, the idea tonight is, you know, we need to do something, and we need to start somewhere. So what I was thinking, and I thought the agenda said town manager search and evaluation process. So is it not?
Staff
Think of that.
evaluations is in future
Okay.
agenda items, and search process is in 8.
Okay. So I think we need to, so my preference, just because of time, would be to do parallel tracks here. I think we need to have an evaluation process for Beth, and I think we need to have, start to assemble the entities that run town manager searches and get a flavor of what that would cost and what it would look like and what's out there for us to use at the same time. I think those would be the initial first steps, but I'm open to suggestions from anyone. First evaluation, I think, we have that, what Morgan, Brown, and Joy put together. That process, we could use that. I think that's part of the search process, in my opinion, is to do an evaluation. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks, but that would be where I would start, at least tonight, is to have, maybe Mark or somebody, put together, figure out the entities that do these searches, and, what the costs are, what the timeline is, what they recommend for, a process for a town like Winchester, and, start putting that together, and then also, evaluate, give an evaluation to Beth at the same time. So with what was created with Morgan, Brown, and Joy last year. I don't know what
Yeah,
people's thoughts are.
that makes sense to me, I mean, on both those fronts, and I think it's important that we have a consistent tool for evaluation as well, because certainly there's exposure there, but there's, also that there needs to be a level of fairness and expectation, for the employee that's being reviewed, so.
Can that be, I assume the three of you have seen that, can that be shared with John and I as a new board members?
Yes, Ken. I'm just trying to figure out if I've seen it before. Have we seen it? I mean, I think we saw that, yeah. Did we?
Yeah.
We've seen it before, I think. Yeah, we could share that, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm open to suggestions. I mean,
No,
I'm just throwing that out there as the first steps.
The 360, you mean?
Yeah, it's a 360 review, and then that evaluation process, and the, having someone gather the names of the firms. And
If they're mutually exclusive, even if she got 100 out of 100, right? I mean, we still need, I think, if I'm the residents, we need to see what else is out there. I mean, with a deeper experience level that can help guide us on things. As much as we need reports, I want someone who's looking, who's been there and done that and looked around the corner and found these 7 things, the 3 things, whether it's choosing town council or whatever that is, that they give us good counsel.
Yep.
Like I thought Richard was an excellent town manager. Not that Beth's not, but are there others out there that have an interest in working here in our environment? Do we have the right environment and the right fit for our town?
Yep.
So yes, to your point, that I'm fully on board with the search. Yeah.
So last time we set up a working group, and we had Tom Halley and Sam Allison co-chair that.
Yep. Go ahead.
No, I don't know if that's something that we want to do again.
I just don't know if we're at that. I guess in my opinion, I'd want to see what companies are out there and stuff. I just don't know if we're at that point, and I don't know if that's the next step, I guess, in my opinion. If we need to have such an involved.
So Mike, what does the MMA say? Do they have a whole process that, they recommend municipality follows?
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone, right? And finding the right fit depending what you're looking for. And there aren't a lot of experienced town managers in this field, right? So
there are a lot of vacancies.
There's a lot of vacancies, right? So and and even Richard, when he came to us, right? He came to us as a mayor. So there's
right, exactly.
finding the right skill set and that works for us, right? Even some town administrators, right? That have experience. we're an active community, right? So you need someone that's got a little bit of, you know, ability to be public facing as well, right? So anyway, so yeah, the MMA says, you know, different things. I think what I've seen is a lot of experience is what, you know, we've experienced with people. You get a lot of applicants, you narrow it down to a few, people drop out at the last minute, and then, you know, you've got to make a choice about moving forward, and then that's it. So to Rich's point, I don't think that we're there yet, but there's, it's worthwhile reaching out to one of the firms that does it. I don't know if who we chose last time is available, or, so, you know, I don't know.
Just for clarification on that process, it's reaching out to a firm for candidates that would then roll into a search committee in terms of selecting resumes. And
Or I thought
At
just
this
the
point,
process, yeah.
at this point, the step I was saying was, we figure out who are those companies that do this now?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are the costs involved, and what is the timeline and process, and what are their recommendations for, like, if they were hired to do it for Winchester, what would they be recommending we do? I think that's step one. And then on the same, you know, parallel track, you know, in the process, I think we need to do a 360 evaluation of Beth. Those are the two steps that I would.
So in your
Thank you.
left hand, can we also say, all right, of those placements, how many stuck for what period of time?
Sure.
Right? No, that's a legitimate question, right?
Yeah. No, I agree.
And I think in going through both of these at the same time, Mike just alluded to, there's potentially not a lot of candidates. There's a lot of town manager candidates who are at their sort of retirement point. You know, we're going through a search process. If Beth is our, you know, town manager candidate, that also legitimizes her role in the town from interim to appointed, and I think, you know, can be helpful in building consensus in her role going forward.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
So I think we need to move quick. There's some important appointments that the town manager is gonna have to hire.
Let's say, this is the DPW.
And I think, you know, somebody looking for that job is going to look at who's gonna be my boss, right? And so I agree with Anthea that having the search gives legitimacy, but at the same time, everybody that I've talked to says we already have the right person sitting in that chair. Whether it is community members, whether it is employees, and given that the next town manager is gonna have to hire the head of DPW, and that person's gonna say, who am I gonna work for next year, next 5 years, right? And so I think it's gonna be a lot harder to have somebody with still an acting title, make that very important hire. So if we do a search, we need to do it really quick. I'm okay with appointing Beth as our permanent town manager. I think we have the right person there already. But if we're gonna do a search, I would say let's do it really quick, because
Yeah, and
there's important business for the next town manager to do.
And in response to that, I'll say, I don't know, because I would want, you know, I think that 360 process is, you know, a valuable tool to getting us closer to that answer. So that's, and, you know, at the same time, I think, you know, to your point, you know, I think we need to do, you know, have a search ready as well. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, I still think you need to have some type of search process in order to validate the selection. You know, how big or small that is, I'm not sure, but you've got to have something. And I think, you know, using the DPW director job, for example, I think they're gonna have to post that job soon in order to fill it by the time, you know, Jay retires. So, you know, it's a point well taken, and I just think that ship is, I don't think the time is all gonna work out, you know? But we could get that evaluation going as, you know, as quickly, we can, we can go back to Morgan Brown and Joy and get that done. I know Anthea and John want to take a look at it, so why don't we when we get that to everybody and decide on July 18th about, moving forward with that evaluation process, unless, people feel comfortable moving with it, now. I mean, flying blind, so.
No, I would say that's more of a interest in seeing it, and with the assumption that the other three of you had seen it, I am comfortable with saying, let's move forward with an evaluation process.
Okay. Are you comfortable with the 360 process?
Our practice in the past is that the chair decides the process
Oh, okay.
and goes forward with the evaluation. Before, it was only the chair did the evaluation, and then for a couple of years, the chair passed different pieces of the evaluation to different people. So to me, it's completely, if you want to do the 360 project, it's up to you. And if you want to give parts of it to us, that's up to you. So,
I mean, I prefer to do the 360.
I don't understand what we're talking about. So, I mean, the way that we did it last time is there were a couple people that worked with Morgan Brown and Joy on developing the content for the 360, right? And that was an iterative process. We did have meetings about that. We discussed it. And then it was, we identified people to send it out to, staff members, and that's what happened. I mean, I didn't feel like there was a heavy hand from the chair saying, this is the process and this is what's happening. I think it was collaborative. I think it has to be, right?
No, I agree.
So, yeah.
So my preference would be to use that process, because I think it's collaborative, and I think it's really important to get, and I think it has to be anonymous, but the department head's feedback and the people that work, we see Beth, in our sphere here, but I think it's, important to get, how that relationship works with everyone else, and see that, to be a proper evaluation, so.
I guess what I said is, I'm comfortable with you starting that tomorrow morning.
Okay. If everyone's comfortable with that, I'll start that process.
100%. Sounds good.
Okay, and then I think I'll direct Mark to begin, identifying those companies that do searches. We'll circle back. Any other thoughts on it? Okay, well, thank you all for your feedback on that. I mean, I've never done this before, so I don't have a right or wrong answer. I think, it's just how we want to do it. I just think we need to do the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as posted in the Monday, June 27th, 2022 agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Unanimous. It's 11:28. What's the record? You want 30? You want to stay for you want 3 minutes? You want me to start reading like War and Peace or something? Reading from the phone book?
Oh my God, no.
Filibuster?
All right. I appreciate, obviously this meeting went way longer than, but we had a lot of stuff on there. I appreciate your diligence, and, I think it was important to get this stuff done today. So, thank you for that. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thanks, Patty. Thank you, WinCam.
Thanks, Cam.
Thanks, Rich.
so